satisfy his own lust, will find the right leader to initiate him in. This book, no incarnate adept, however high his rank may be, can give the disciple more for his start than the present book does, if both the honest trainee and the attentive reader will find in this book all they have been searching for in vain all the years, then the book has fulfilled its purpose completely. The author. Part 1. Theory.
Power on.
Picture of a magician. The
Bluetooth pairing.
Interpretation of the symbolism. Below you.
Bluetooth connected.
Kingdoms expressed in a symbolic manner. The female on the left side and the male on the right side are the plus, positive, and the minus, negative, in every human being. In their middle is seen a hermaphrodite, a creature personifying the male and female, combined in one as the sign of consanguinity between the male and female principle. The electrical and magnetical fluids are shown in red and blue colors, electrical fluid being red, magnetical fluid blue. The head region of the female is electrical, therefore red. The region of the genitals is magnetical, consequently blue. As for the male, it happens to be in inverted order. Above the hermaphrodite there is a globe as a sign of the earth sphere, above which the magician is illustrated with the 4 elements. Above the male, there are the active elements, that of the fire in red and the air element in blue color. Above the female there are the passive elements, the water element and green and the element of the earth in yellow color. The middle along the magician up to the globe is dark purple, representing the sign of the Akasa principle. Above the magician's head, with an invisible ribbon for a crown, there is a gold-edged silvery white lotus flower as a sign of the divinity. In the inside there is the ruby red philosopher's stone symbolizing the quintessence of the whole Hermetic science. On the right side in the background there is the sun, yellow like gold, and on the left side we see the moon, silvery white, expressing plus and minus in the macro and microcosm, the electrical and magnetical fluids. Above the lotus flower, creation has been symbolized by a ball, in the interior of which are represented the procreative positive and negative forces which stand for the creating act of the universe. The eternal, the infinite, the boundless, and the uncreated have been expressed symbolically by the word aum and the dark purple to black color. Initiation I. Theory. The great secret of the tetragrammaton or the Kabbalistical Yod-He-Vahi device, that which is above is also that which is below, Hermes Trismegistus. 1. About the elements. Everything that has been created, the macrocosm as well as the microcosm, consequently the big and the small world, have been achieved by the effect of the elements. For this reason, right from the beginning of the initiation, I shall attend to these powers and underline their deep and manifold significance in particular. In the occult literature very little has been said about the powers of the elements up to now, so that I made it my business to treat this field of knowledge still unknown and to lift the veil covering these rules. It is absolutely not very easy to enlighten the uninitiated so that they are not only fully informed about the existence and the activity of the elements, but will be able to work with these powers in the future. Practically, the whole universe is similar to a clockwork with all its wheels enmeshed and interdependent from each other. Even the idea of the Godhead as the highest comprehensible entity may be divided in aspects analogous to the elements. Details about it are found in the chapter concerning the God idea. In the oldest Oriental scriptures, the elements are designated as tatwas. In our European literature, they are only considered on the ground of their good effects and insofar as we are warned against their unfavorable influence, which means that certain actions can be undertaken under the influence of the tatwas, or else must be omitted. The accuracy of this fact is not to be doubted, but all that has been published up to date points to a slight aspect of the effects of the elements only. How to find out about the effects of elements respecting the that was for any personal use, may be sufficiently learned from astrological books. I am penetrating far deeper into the secret of the elements, and therefore I have chosen a different key, which, although being analogous to the astrological key, has, as a matter of fact, nothing to do with it. The reader, to whom this key is completely unknown, shall be taught to use it in various ways. As for the single tasks, analogies and effects of the elements, I shall deal with 10 by turns and in detail in the following chapters, which will not only unveil the theoretical part of it, but point directly to the practical use, because it is here that the greatest arcanum is to be found. In the oldest book of wisdom, the Tarot, something has already been written about this great mystery of the elements. The first card of this work represents the magician pointing to the knowledge and mastery of the elements. On this first card the symbols are, the sword as the fiery element, the rod as the element of the air, the goblet as that of the water, and the coins as the element of the earth. This proves without any doubt that already in the mysteries of yore, the magician was destined for the first tarot card, mastery of the elements having been chosen as the first act of initiation. In honor of this tradition I shall give my principal attention to the elements, for, as you will see, the key to the elements is the panacea, with the help of which all the occurring problems may be solved. According to the Indian succession of the tatwas, it runs as follows. Akasa principle of the ether. Tejas principle of the fire. Vajra principle of the air. Upas principle of the water. Prithvi principle of the earth. In accordance with the Indian doctrine, it has been said that the four somehow grosser tatwas have descended from the fifth tatwa, the Akasa principle. Consequently, Akasa is the cause ultimate and to be regarded as the fifth power, the so-called quintessence. In one of the following chapters, I shall inform the reader about this most subtle element Akasa in detail. The specific qualities of each element, beginning with the highest planes right down to the grossly material level, will be mentioned in all the following chapters. By now the reader has surely realized that it is no easy task to analyze the great mystery of creation, and word it in such a way that everybody gets the chance of penetrating the topic to form a plastic picture of it all. The analysis of the elements will also be discussed and the great practical value of them underlined, so that every scientist, whether he be a chemist, a physician, a magnetizer, an occultist, a magician, a mystic, a quabbalist or a yogi, etc., can derive his practical benefit from it, should I succeed in teaching the reader so far that he is able to deal with the subject in the proper way and to find the practical key to the branch of knowledge most suitable for him. I will be glad to see that the purpose of my book has been fulfilled. 2. The principle of fire. As it has been said before, Akasa or the etheric principle is the cause of the origin of the elements. According to the Oriental scriptures, the first element born from Akasa is believed to be Tejas, the principle of fire. This element, as well as all the others, manifest there. Influence not only in our roughly material plane but also in everything created. The basic qualities of the fiery principle are heat and expansion. In the beginning of all things created, therefore must have been fire and light, and in the Bible we read, Fiat lux, there shall be light. The origin of the light, of course, is to be sought in the fire. Each element, and therefore that of fire, too, has two polarities, that is, the active and the passive one, which means positive, plus, and negative. Plus will always signify the constructive, the creative, the productive sources, whereas minus stands for all that is destructive or dissecting. There are always two basic qualities, which must be clearly distinguished in each element. Religions have always imputed the good to the active and the evil to the passive side. But fundamentally spoken, there are no such things as good or bad, they are nothing but human conceptions. In the universe there is neither good nor evil, because everything has been created according to immutable rules, wherein the divine principle is reflected, and only by knowing these rules shall we be able to come nearer to the divinity. As mentioned before, the fiery principle owns the expansion, which I shall call electrical fluid, for the sake of better comprehension. This definition does not just point to the roughly material electricity in spite of its having a certain analogy to it. Everyone will realize at once, of course, that the quality of expansion is identical with extension. This elementary principle of fire is latent and active in all things created, as a matter of fact, in the whole universe, beginning from the tiniest grain of sand to the most sublime substance, visible or invisible. 3. The principle of water. In the previous chapter we have studied the origin and the qualities of the positive element of fire. In this chapter I am going to describe the opposite principle, the water. It is also derived from Akasa, the etheric principle, but in comparison with fire, it has quite contrasting Qualities. These basic qualities are coldness and shrinkage. The point in question are also two poles, the active one being constructive, life-giving, nourishing and protective, whereas the negative pole, similar to the one of fire, is destructive, dissecting, fermenting, and dividing. As this element owns the basic quality of shrinking and contraction, it has produced the magnetic fluid. Fire as well as water are operating in all regions. According to the rules of creation, the fiery principle would not be able to exist all by itself if it did not conceal inside. As opposite pole the principle of water. These two elements, fire and water, are the basic elements with the help of which all has been created. In consequence of these facts, we have everywhere to reckon on two main elements. Moreover, with the electrical and magnetical fluids which represent the contrasting polarities. 4. The principle of air. Another element derived from akasa is that of air. Initiated people do not regard this principle as a real element, but they will grant it the role of a mediator between the fiery and the watery principles, so that the principle of air will, in a certain way, establish the neutral equilibrium, acting as a medium between the active and the passive activities of water and of fire. Through the interaction of the active and passive elements of fire and water, the whole created life has become motion. In its mediatorship, the principle of air has assumed the quality of warmth from the fire and that of humidity from the water. Without these two qualities, any life would be inconceivable. These two qualities will also grant two polarities to the airy principle, which means in the positive outcome the life-giving polarity, and in the negative aspect the destructive polarity. In addition to that, let me say that the mentioned elements are not to be regarded as ordinary fire, water and air, which will solely represent aspects of the grossly material plane, but in this case universal qualities of all elements are concerned. 5. The principle of earth. It has been said of the principle of air that it does not represent an element proper, and this affirmation goes for the principle of earth likewise. Now this means that out of the interaction of the three aforesaid elements, the earthy principle has been born as the last element, which by its specific quality, the solidification, involves all the three elements. It is this quality in particular which has given a concrete shape to the three aforesaid elements. But at the same time, the action of the three elements has been limited with the result of space, measure, weight and time having been born. The reciprocal action of the three elements together with that of the earth, thus, has become tetrapolar, so that the earthy principle may be labeled now as a four-pole magnet. The fluid and the polarity of the earth, the element, is electromagnetic. All the life created can therefore be explained by the fact that all elements are active in the fourth, that is, the earth element. Through realization in this element came out the fiat, it shall be. Details concerning the specific influences of the elements in the various spheres and kingdoms, such as the kingdoms of nature, of animals and of human beings, will be found in the following chapters. The main point is that the reader gets a general impression about the workshop and the effect of the elemental principles in the entire universe. 6. The light. Light is established on the principle of fire. Light without fire is unconceivable, and for this particular reason it is an aspect of the fire. Each fiery element can be converted into light and the other way around. Therefore light involves all the specific qualities such as shining, penetrating, expanding. The opposite of light is darkness, which has come out of the principle of water. Darkness has the contrasting specific qualities of the light. Without darkness, light would not only remain quite unrecognizable, but without darkness there would never be any light at all. Evidently, light and darkness must have been produced by the mutual play of two elements, consequently those of fire and water. Light in its outcome therefore has the positive quality, whereas darkness has the negative one. This interplay evidently is working in all regions. 7. Akasa, or the ethereal principle. Several times while describing the elements I have said that they proceed from the ethereal principle. Accordingly, the ethereal principle is the ultimate, the supreme, the most powerful thing, something inconceivable, the ultimate cause of all things existing and created. To put it in a nutshell, it is the causal sphere. Therefore Akasa is spaceless and timeless. It is the non-created, the incomprehensible, the indefinable. The various religions have given it the name of God. It is the fifth power, the original power. Everything has been created by it and is kept in balance by it. It is the origin and the purity of all thoughts and intentions. It is the causal world wherein the whole creation is subsisting on, beginning from the highest spheres down to the lowest ones. It is the quintessence of the alchemists. It is all in all. 8. Karma. An immutable law, which has its aspect just in the Akasa principle, is the law of cause and effect. Each cause sets free a corresponding effect. This law works everywhere as the most sublime rule. Consequently, every deed proceeds from a cause or is followed by any result. Therefore, we should not only accept karma as a rule for our good actions, as the Oriental philosophy puts it, but its signification reaches farther and is a very deep one. Instinctively all men have the feeling that something good can bring good results only, and again all the evil must end up with evil, or, in the words of a proverb, whatsoever a man sows, that shall he reap. Everybody is bound to know this law and to respect it. This law of cause and effect governs the elemental principles, too. I have no intention to enter into details of this law, which could be expressed in a few words, as they are quite clear so that every reasonable man will understand them. Subject to this law of cause and effect is also the law of evolution or development. Thus development is an aspect of the karma law. Man. 9. About the body. Man is the true image of God. He has been created in the likeness of the universe. Everything great to be found in the universe is reflected, by a small degree, in man. For this reason, man is signified as a microcosm in contrast to the macrocosm of the universe. Strictly speaking, the entire nature manifests itself in man, and it will be the task of this chapter to inform about these problems. I do not intend to describe the physical occurrences in the body because everybody can find information about it in any respective work. What I shall teach is to regard man from the Hermetic standpoint, and I shall enlighten interested people as to how to use the fundamental key, the influence of the elements on man, in the right way. A well-known maxim says, a sound mind and a sound body. The genuine truth of this aphorism represents itself immediately to everybody dealing with the problem of man. There surely will arise the question, what health is from the Hermetic point of view? Not everyone is capable to answer this question at the first instant. Seen from the Hermetic angle, health is the perfect harmony of all the forces operating inside the body with respect to the basic qualities of the elements. There need not prevail such a great disharmony of the elementate to set free a visible effect which is called disease. For disharmony in the form of sickness is already an essential disturbance in the workshop of the elements inside the body. The main condition for the novice is to concentrate himself absolutely on his body. The outwardly visible expression of the body resembles that of a beautiful garment, and beauty, in all its aspects, is likewise an aspect of the divine nature. Beauty, properly speaking, is not only that which pleases us or appears to be sympathetic to our taste, because sympathy or antipathy are dependent on the interaction of the elements. Genuine health is rather a basic condition of our spiritual arising. If we like to live in beauty, we must form our house, our flat, or, in this case, our body, beautifully and fill it with harmony. According to the universal law, the elements have to perform certain functions inside our body. These are mainly building up the body, keeping it alive, and dissolving it. The positive part in the body, the building up, is therefore the business of the positive or active side of the elements. The preserving part is brought about by the linking or connecting part of the elements, that is, the neutral, whereas the destructive or dissolving part in the body is realized by the negative qualities of the elements. It is obvious that the fiery principle in the active form with its electrical fluid will exert the active, expansive, building up influence. The contrary will be the case in the negative form. The watery principle, in its active form, will influence the building up activity. In its negative form, it will produce the disintegrating, dissolving activity of all the fluids in the body. With the principle of air rests the task of controlling the electrical fluid of the fire and the magnetic fluid of the water in the body, keeping them in balance. For this reason it has been characterized as the neutral or mediating element. It has been said in the fundamental key about the forces of the principle of earth that it has the function inside the body to keep together the influences of the three elements. In the active form of the earthy principle, it has an animating, vivifying, invigorating influence, and, in the negative form, it is the other way round. The earthy principle is responsible for the thriving as well as for the aging of the body. We could mention quite a lot of analogies with respect to the influence of the elements inside the body, but let it be enough with the foregoing explanations. Adepts of all periods never described the effects of the elements in particular, probably to avoid any misuse, but they did know very well all about it. They divided man in three basic conceptions, attributing the head to the fiery principle, the abdomen to that of water, and the chest to the airy one as the mediating principle between fire and water. How very right they were with their dividing. Man becomes obvious at the first look, because all that is active or fiery takes place in the head. In the abdomen it must be the contrary, the watery, the secretion The work of the saps, etc. The chest underlies the air and has a mediating part, because here, breathing takes place quite mechanically. The earthy principle with its cohesive power or ability of holding together represents the whole of the human body with all its bones and flesh. Now the question will arise where and how a causa or the etheric principle occurs in the grossly material body. In doing some deeper thinking, everybody will be able to answer this question by himself, for the etheric principle is hidden in its most grossly material form in the blood, and in the seed and in the reciprocal action of these two substances in the vital matter or in the vitality. As we have learned, the fiery element produces the electrical and the water element the magnetic fluid. Each of these fluids has two polar radiations, an active and a passive one, and the mutual influences and interactions of all the radiations of the four poles resemble a tetrapolar magnet, which is identical to the secret of the tetragrammaton, the Yad-Vahi of the Kabbalists. Therefore the electromagnetic fluid in the human body, in its emanation, is the animal magnetism, the odd or whatever name it has been given. The right side of the human body is active electric, provided that the individual be right-handed. The left side is passive magnetic. As for the left-handed person, the contrary will take place. The emanative power of this electromagnetic fluid is dependent on the capacitance, that is, the intensity of action of the elements inside the body. The more harmoniously this action of the elements is going on in the body, all the stronger and purer this emanation will be. With the help of certain exercises as well as by a correct attitude and an exact observance of these rules, the capacitance, strength and influence of this electromagnetic fluid aura can be increased or diminished according to whatever necessity requires. The way of doing it will exhaustively be illustrated in the practical part of the present work. The electrical as well as the magnetical fluid in the human body have nothing to do with the kind of electricity or magnetism we know, although a certain analogy exists. This law of analogy is a very important factor in the Hermetic science, and the knowledge of it enables the adept to perform great miracles with the aid of this key. The food contains the elements mingled with each other. The result of taking in food is a chemical process by which the elements are preserved in our body. From the medical point of view, the taking in of any kind of food, together with the breathing, causes a process of combustion. The Hermetist sees far more in this process than just a simple chemical event. He regards this combustion as the mutual dissolving of food, just like the fire is kept burning by fuel. Therefore the whole life depends on the continuous supply of fuel, that is the food and the breathing. To supply every element with the necessary preserving substances, a mixed food is advisable which contains the fundamental materials of the elements. If we were to restrict our whole life to a one-sided kind of food only, our body would, without any doubt, fall ill, meaning that such a kind of food would produce a disharmony in the body. By the disintegration of air and food, the elements are provided with the supporting substances and, in this way their activity is maintained. Such is man's natural mode of life. If an element is missing, as it were, the fuel, all the functions depending on it are immediately affected. If, for example, the fiery element in the body works excessively, we feel thirsty. The air element makes us feel hungry. The element of water causes a feeling of cold, and the earthy element produces tiredness. On the other hand, every oversaturation of the elements causes reinforced effects in the body. A surplus of the fiery element creates a yearning for movement and activity. If this be the case with the watery element, the secretive process will be stronger. Any oversaturation of the airy element indicates that we must be moderate in taking food at all. An oversaturation of the earth element affects the aspects of sexual life, which must not necessarily find expression in the sexual instinct in the fleshly sense. It is quite possible, and this will especially occur in the case of elderly people, that they will feel a longing for increased activity and for productive agility. In their active and passive polarity, the electric and the magnetic fluids have the task of forming acid combinations in all the organic and inorganic bodies, from the chemical point of view. Eventually from the alchemistic standpoint too, in the active sense they are constructive, and in the negative sense they are destructive, dissolving and disintegrating. All this explains the biological functions in the body. The final result is the circulation of life, which is brought into existence, thrives, ripens and fades away. This is the sense of evolution of all things created. A diet. A reasonable line of life maintains the harmony of the elements in the body. As soon as a disharmony in the effect of elements becomes manifest, the elements being extant in a weakened or a prevailing way, special measures have to be taken as far as food is concerned to carry the elements back to their normal course, or at least to influence them favorably in this respect. Therefore, the most varying diets are prescribed for specific cases. In times long past, numerous observation led men to this opinion, of which they ignored the exact reason. If the disturbance of the elements is such as to render visible this disharmony, it is no longer solely a disharmony, but we have to deal with an illness. This will mean that more drastic remedies will be necessary to re-establish the indispensable harmony, providing we desire to bring the body back to its normal function and complete recovery. All the curing methods known up to this day have been based on this fundament. I desist from particularizing such methods, as most of them are generally known. The natural therapy employs thermic effects, such as bathing, poultices, herbs, massages, etc. The allopathist utilizes concentrated medicines, which are causing the effects corresponding to the elements and destined to repair health. The homeopathist brings to life the contrasting element according to the device similia similibus curantur, to achieve the balance of all that is in danger in conformity with the polarity laws. The electro-homeopathist, by use of his remedies, influences the electrical and magnetical fluids directly to balance the disorderly elements, according to the kind of illness, by a suitable reinforcement of these fluids. And so each curing method serves the purpose of restoring the disturbed equipoise of the elements. By studying these influences of the elements on our body, the magnetopath or magnetizer has far more possibilities of influencing the body through his powers, especially if he is capable to awake the electrical or magnetical fluid consciously in himself, increasing and transferring it into the part of the body that has come into disharmony. I have dedicated a special heading of this book to the practical side of this treatment. So far, the total functions of the body have been stated in detail, but each part of the body is also, in analogy with the effect of the elements in the body, influenced by a specific element, which finds its expression in the polarity of the responsive part of the body. It happens to be a very interesting fact that in the workshop, respectively in the clockwork or mechanism, which is to say in the human organism, some organs, from the inside to the outside, reciprocally, own the electrical fluid, and from the outside to the inside they possess the magnetical fluid, which affects the functions in the entire organism in an analogous and harmonious way. In other organs the reverse process takes place, the electrical fluid operating from the outside to the inside, the magnetical one from the inside to the outside. This knowledge of the polar emanation is called in the Hermetic art the occult anatomy of the body, and the knowledge of the effect of this occult anatomy is extremely important for every adept who wants to know his body, to influence and to control it. I shall therefore describe this occult anatomy of the human body with respect to the electrical and magnetical fluid, that is to say, in the positive and in the negative sphere of action. These arguments will turn to magnetopath's great advantage because he will treat the sick part of the body with the electrical or the magnetical fluid, according to the center of the disease. But this knowledge will bring great profit to everybody else too. The head, the forepart is electric, the back of the head is magnetic, and so is the right side. The left side is electric, and so is the middle. The eyes, the forepart is neutral, and so is the background. The right side is electric, and so it is with the left side. The inside is magnetical. The ears, forepart neutral, back part also. Right side is magnetical, left side electrical, inside neutral. Mouth and tongue, forepart neutral, back part as well. Right side and left side both neutral. Inside magnetical. The neck, forepart, back part and right side magnetical, left side and inside electrical. The chest, forepart electromagnetic, back part electrical, right side and inside neutral, left side electrical. The abdomen, forepart electrical, back part and right side magnetical, left side electrical, the inside magnetical. The hands, forepart neutral, back part also, right side magnetical, left side electrical, the inside neutral. The fingers of the right hand, fore and back part neutral, right side electrical, left side also, the inside neutral. The fingers of the left hand, fore and back part neutral, right side electrical, left side as well, the inside neutral. The feet, fore and back part neutral, right side magnetical, left side electrical, the inside neutral. The male genitals, forepart electrical, back part neutral, right and left side also, the inside magnetical. The female genitals, forepart magnetical, back part, right and left side neutral, the inside electrical. The last vertebra and anus, fore and back part neutral, right and left side as well, the inside magnetical. With the help of this occult anatomy and the key of the tetrapolar magnet, the adept may compile further analogies if wanted. The alchemist will recognize that the human body represents a genuine athana in which the most perfect alchemistic process, the great work, or the preparation of the philosopher's stone is visibly performed. Here with the chapter dealing with the body is finished. I do not assert that all has been regarded, but in any case, with respect to the elements, I mean to say, the four-pole magnet, I have treated the most important problems and revealed the secret of the tetragrammaton in view of the body. 10. The roughly material plane or the material world. In this chapter I will not describe the roughly material world, the kingdoms of minerals, vegetables and animals, nor will I deal with the physical processes in nature, because everybody has already learned at school that there are such things as the North and South Poles, how rain originates, how storms are brought about, etc. The incipient adept might not be so very interested in these occurrences, but he will rather endeavor to know all about the material world by means of the elements and their polarities. It is needless to mention that on our planet, there are fire, water, air and earth, a fact absolutely clear to each reasonably thinking person. Notwithstanding, it will be very useful if the adept becomes acquainted with the cause and effect of the four elements and knows how to use them correctly, according to the corresponding analogies on the other planes. How it is possible to contact higher planes through knowing the grossly material elements will be reserved to a further chapter dealing with the practical use of magic. At the moment, it is important to know that of our earth the working of elements in the subtlest form is evolving often exactly the same manner as in the human body. By drawing analogies to the human body, one will certainly find out how to draw the parallel to the elements, and state that the analogy with the human body seems justified. In the chapter relative to the human body we have been discussing the mode of life and the functions of the elements with respect to the body, and if the adept succeeds in using the elements in the most subtle form, he will already be able to achieve wondrous things on his own body. And not only this, he can, in all conscience, affirm that nothing is impossible in this respect. The earthy element implies the four-pole magnet with its polarity and the effect of the other elements. The fiery principle, in its active form, causes the vivifying principle of nature, and in the negative form the destructive and disintegrating one. The principle of water, in its negative form, is operating the contrary effect. The principle of air, with its bipolar polarity, represents the neutral, the balancing and the preserving essence in nature. The earthy element, according to its peculiarity of cohesion, has as a basis the two great fundamental elements of fire and water together with the neutralization of the airy principle. Hence it must be regarded as the most grossly material element, by the interaction of the fiery and the watery element. We have, as already mentioned in connection with the body, got the magnetic and the electric fluid, the two basic fluids originating, according to the same laws, in the body and having their mutual effects. Both these elements, with their fluids, are the cause of all that happens materially on our earth. They influence all the chemical processes inside and outside of the earth in the kingdoms of minerals, plants and animals. Hence you see that the electric fluid is to be found in the center of the earth, whereas the magnetic one is on the surface of our earth. This magnetic fluid of the earth's surface, apart from the property of the principle of water or the cohesion, attracts and holds all material and compound things, according to the specific properties of the body, which depend on the composition of the elements. Each object, with respect to the electric fluid, owns certain emanations, the so-called electronic vibrations that are attracted by the general magnetic fluid of the entire material world. This attraction is called the weight. Consequently, weight is an appearance of the attractive power of the earth. The well-known attractive power of iron and nickel is a little example respecting an imitation of that which is happening, in a big measure, on our whole earth. What we understand, on our earth, of magnetism and electricity, is nothing else but an appearance of the four-pole magnet. For, as we know already, by an arbitrary pole changing, electricity can be obtained from magnetism, and, in a mechanical way, we get magnetism through electricity. The transmutation of one power into another, properly speaking, is already an alchemistic or magic process, which, however, in the course of time, has been generalized so much that it is no longer regarded as alchemy or magic, but is simply ascribed to physics. For this reason, it is obvious that the four-pole magnet can be used here also, according to the law concerning the problems of magnetism and electricity, not only in the body, as mentioned in the foregoing chapter, but also in the grossly materialistic world. Each hermeticist exactly knows that what is above is also that which is below. Each adept who knows how to employ the powers of the element or the great secret of the Tetragrammaton on all planes, is also capable to achieve great things in our material world, things which the outsider would regard as miracles. The adept, however, sees no miracles in them, for, backed by the knowledge of the laws, he will be able to explain even the most remarkable curiosity. Everything on our earth, all thriving, ripening, life and death depend on the statements made in these chapters. Hence the adept fully conceives that physical death does not mean disintegration, passing into nothingness, but what we consider as annihilation or death is nothing else but the transition from one stage into another. The material world has emerged from the principle of the causa, that is, the known ether. The world also is controlled and kept by this same principle. Therefore it is understandable that it is the transmission of the electric core, the magnetic fluid on which are based all the inventions connected with the communication at distance, through the ether, such as radio, telegraphy, telephony, television and all the other inventions to be achieved in the future, with the aid of the electric or magnetic fluid in the ether. But the fundamental principles and laws were, are and always will be the same. A very extensive and exciting book to be written solely about the effects of the various magnetic and electric fluids on the grossly material plane. But the interested reader who has decided to walk on the path of initiation and will not be deterred by the study of the principles, will find out by himself all about the varieties of powers and properties, the fruits, and the insights he earned in the course of his studies will indemnify him amply. The soul or the astral body, through subtler vibrations of the elements, through the electric and the magnetic fluid of their polarity, the man proper, the soul has proceeded from the akasa principle or the finer etheric vibrations. In the same way as the elements are functioning in the material body, the soul or the so-called astral body will behave. The four-pole magnet, with its specific qualities, connects or amalgamates the soul with the body. This amalgamation takes place, with analogy to the body, by the electromagnetic influence of the elements. We, the adepts, call the astral matrix or life this active behavior of the elements or the so-called electromagnetic fluid of the soul. This astral matrix or the so-called electromagnetic fluid of the soul is not identical with the occultists or I shall speak of later. The astral matrix or the electromagnetic fluid is the connecting link between the body and soul. The fiery principle causes in the soul what is constructive. The principle of water causes the animating. The principle of air is balancing, and the earth principle causes what is thriving, compound and preserving in the soul. The astral body is performing exactly the same functions as the material body. Man has been fitted with the five senses corresponding to the five elements, of which the astral body or the soul, with the help of the bodily senses, makes use to receive perceptions of the physical world. Our immortal spirit realizes this receiving and operating of the five senses through the astral and the material body. Why this spirit is immortal will be explained in a later chapter. Without any activity of the spirit in the soul, the astral body would be without life and dissolve itself into its components. As the spirit would not be able to operate without the intervention of the soul, the astral body is the seat of all the qualities the immortal spirit has, according to its development and maturity. Spirit has a different electric or magnetic fluid vibration, which becomes outwardly patent in soul, in the four temperaments. In accordance with the predominant elements, we distinguish the choleric, the sanguine, the melancholic, and the phlegmatic temper. The choleric temper is due to the element of air. The sanguine temper is due to the element of air. The melancholic temper is born from the water element, and the phlegmatic one is ascribed to the earthy element. The strength and vibration of the respective element corresponds in the various properties to the strength, vigor, and expansion of the respective fluid vibrations. Each of these four elements, which determine man's temper, in the active form, owns the good properties, and in its passive form, the contrary or bad qualities. It would be too prolix to inform here about the effects of the elements, and it is better for the incipient adept to find out himself further effects by his own meditation. This manner also has a very special reason. On the path to initiation, here I shall a few examples only. The choleric temper, in its active polarity, has the following good qualities: activity, enthusiasm, eagerness, resolution, courage, productivity, etc. In the negative form, these qualities are gluttony, jealousy, passion, irritability, intemperance, bent to destruction, etc. The sanguine temper in its active form shows capacity of penetrating, diligence, joy, adroitness, kindness, clearness, lack of grief, cheerfulness, optimism, eagerness, independence, familiarity, etc. in the negative form, continual feeling of being affronted, contempt, propensity to gossiping, lack of endurance, slyness, garrulousness, dishonesty, fickleness, etc. The melancholic temper in its active form, respectability, modesty, compassion, devotion, seriousness, docility, fervor, cordiality, comprehension, meditation, calmness, quick to give, one's confidence, forgiveness, tenderness, and so on. In the negative form, indifference, depression, apathy, shyness, laziness, etc. The phlegmatic temper in its active form, respectability, reputation, endurance, consideration, resolution, firmness, seriousness, scrupulousness, thoroughness, concentration, sobriety, punctuality, reservedness, objectivity, infallibility, responsibility, reliability, circumspection, resistance, self-assurance, and so on. In the negative form, insipidity, unscrupulousness, misanthropy, dullness, tardiness, laziness, unreliability, laconism, and so on. The qualities of the temperaments, according to the preponderant quality, form the basis of the human character. The intensity of these qualities shown outwardly depends on the polarity, the electric or the magnetic fluid. The total influence of the effects of the temperaments results in an emanation professionally called aura. Therefore, this kind of aura is not to be compared with the astral matrix, because between these two conceptions there is a thumping difference. The astral matrix is the connecting substance between body and soul, whilst the aura is the emanation of the action of the elements in the various qualities, having its origin either in the active or in the passive form. This emanation in the whole soul produces a certain vibration corresponding to a certain color. On the grounds of this color, the adept can exactly recognize his own aura of it of another being with the astral lines. Backed by this aura, the seer can establish not only a man's basic character, but he also can perceive the action or the polarity of the soul's vibration, and influence it eventually. I shall speak of these problems in a more detailed way in a separate chapter relating to introspection. Hence, a man's temperament influences his character, and both together, in their effect as total result, are creating the emanation of the soul or the aura. This is also the reason for high adepts or saints always being represented in the images with a halo identical to the aura we have described. Besides the character, the temperament, and the activity of the electromagnetic fluid, the astral body still has two centers in the brain, the cerebrum being the seat of normal consciousness, whilst in the cerebellum, there is the opposite to the normal consciousness, the subconscious. As to their functions, see the chapter concerning the spirit. As it has been said before, according to the elements, the soul is divided in exactly the same way as the body. The psychic functions, powers, and properties also have their seat, respectively, in the soul in certain centers analogous to all the elements, which the Indian philosophy designates as charkas. The awakening of these charkas is named Kundalini Yoga in the Indian doctrine. I desist, however, from a comment on these lotuses or centers, because the student interested in this problem will find all the necessary enlightenment in the respective literature. I will touch on it only slightly and say that the lowest center is the so-called Muladhara or earth center, having its seat in the lowest part of the soul. The next center is that of the water, with its seat in the region of the sexual organs and designated in the Indian terminology as Swadhisthana. The center of fire, as center of the soul, is in the umbilical region and is named Manipura. The center of air as compensatory element is in the region of the heart and is termed Anahata. The center of the ether or principle of Akasa is found in the region of the neck and is named Vijada. Another center, that of volition and intellect, is between the eyebrows and is called Ajna. As the supreme and most divine center, is regarded as the thousand-petaled lotus, named Sahasrara, from which derive and are influenced all the other powers of the centers, beginning at the top, from the supreme center, along the neck, down to the lowest center, like a channel runs the so-called Suzuma or the Akasa principle already known to us, liable for the connection and control of the entire centers. Later on, I shall come back to the problem of the evocation of the snake power in the single centers. In describing the soul, the principal task will be to establish the connection of the elements with their positive and negative polarities in the soul, and give a neat idea of it. One will see that the body, as well as the soul, with their effects are alive and working, that their preservation and destruction are subject to the immutable laws of the four-pole magnet. That is, the secret of the tetragrammaton, and governed by them. If he who is to be initiated will attentively meditate about it, he will win a clear idea not only of the bodily functions, but also as those of the soul, and come to a sound notion of the mutual interaction according to the original laws. 12. The astral plane. The astral plane, often designated as the fourth dimension, has not been created out of the four elements, but it is a density degree of the akasa principle, consequently of all that up to now, the material world occurred, is actually occurring and will occur, and has its origin, regulation, and existence. As said before, akasa in its most subtle form is the ether, well known to all of us, in which, amongst other vibrations, electric as well as magnetic ones are propagating. Consequently, this vibration sphere is the origin of light, sound, color, rhythm, and life in all things created, as akasa is the origin of all existing things. All that ever was produced, is being produced, and will be produced in the future is reflected in it. Therefore, in the astral plane there is to be seen an emanation of the eternal, having neither a beginning nor an end, as it is timeless and spaceless. The adept who sees his way about this plane may find everything here, no matter if the point in question be in the past, the present, or the future. How far this perception will reach depends on the degree of his perfection. Occultists and spiritualists and most of religions name the astral plane the world beyond. However, the adept knows very well that there is no such thing as hence and beyond, and feels no fear of death, which concept is quite strange to him. If, by the disintegrating work of the elements or a sudden break-up, the astral matrix which is connecting matter between the grossly material body and the astral body has got loose, then will happen what we commonly call death, which, however, in reality is nothing else but a passage from the terrestrial world to the astral world. Backed up by this law, the adept knows no fear of death, being convinced that he will not approach uncertainty through his control of the elements. Besides many other things, he also can achieve a slackening of the astral matrix, which will result in a spontaneous separation of the astral body from the mortal frame. Thus he will be able to visit the remotest regions, transfer himself into various planes in the form of his astral body. This is the positive explanation of so many tales in which saints have been seen at the same time in different places and even have been working there. The astral plane has various kinds of inhabitants. First of all, there are the deceased ones who, having left the earth, are abiding in the corresponding density degree, according to their spiritual maturity, which is designated by various religions as heaven or hell. The adepts, seeing only symbols therein, the nobler, purer, and the more perfect an entity happens to be, all the purer and finer will be the density degree of the inhabited astral plane. Little by little, the astral body is dissolving, until it has become suitable to the degree of vibrations of the respective step of the astral level, or identical with it. As you see, this identification depends on the maturity and the spiritual perfection the entity concerned achieved on this earth. Besides, the astral plane is inhabited by many other beings, of which I am mentioning only some species here. There are two so-called elementaries, entities with one or only very few qualities, according to the dominant vibrations of the elements. They are living on the similar vibrations proper to man and transmitted by him into the astral plane. Among them, there are some which have already reached a certain degree of intelligence, and some magicians are using these low-powered beings for their selfish purposes. Another kind of being is the larvae, which have been brought into life consciously or unconsciously by intense sensorial thinking through the astral matrix. They are not real beings, but only forms, thriving on the passions of the animal world, on the lowest step of the astral level. Their instinct of self-preservation carries them into the sphere of those men whose passions are responsive to them. They will try, directly or indirectly, to raise and kindle the passions slumbering in man. If these forms are succeeding in seducing men to give in to their suitable passion, they are feeding and thriving on the emanation of this passion produced in man. Man, laden with many passions, will attract a host of such larvae in the lowest sphere of his astral plane. A great fight takes place, and, in the problem of magic, this fact plays an important role. More about it is to be found in the chapter dealing with introspection. There are also other elementaries and larvae, which can be produced in the artificial magic way. As to further details, see the practical part of this book. Another kind of being the adept often has to deal with in the astral plane must not be overlooked, namely the beings of the four pure elements. In the element of fire, their name is salamander. In the air element they are the sylphs. In the water element, they are called mermaids or undines, and in the element of earth there are the gnomes or goblins. These beings represent, as it were, the connection between the astral plane and the earthly elements. How to establish the connection with these beings, how to control them, what can be achieved with their help, all will be reserved to the practical part of the present book, to which I shall dedicate the special chapter, Magic of the Elements. Furthermore, there is a host of other beings such as satyrs, wood maidens, water goblins, etc., who could be specified. Even if all this sounds like a fairy tale, on the astral plane the previously described beings are the very same realities as all the other earthly beings. The adept's clairvoyant eyes can see all of them, if he desires so, and is able to establish the connection with them, so excluding any doubt of the existence of these beings right from the beginning. That is why the adept has to first and learn to examine, before being able to judge. 13. The Spirit. It has been said before that the spirit of man has been created in the image of God and consists of body, soul, and spirit. The preceding chapters have made it evident that body and soul serve only as a veil or garment for the spirit. The spirit is the immortal part and the image of God. It is not easy to define something divine, immortal, imperishable, and to put it into the correct terms. But here, as well as with any other problem, the key of the four-pole magnet will be a great help for us. From the supreme prototype, Akaza, the original source of all beings, has proceeded the spirit, the spiritual ego with the four specific elemental qualities, proper to the immortal spirit, which was created in God's image. The fiery principle, the impulsive part, means the will, volition. The airy principle shows up in the intellect, mind, the watery principle respectively in the life and the feeling, and the earthy principle is representing the union of all the three elements in the consciousness of the ego. All the other qualities of the spirit are based upon these four original principles. The typical part of the fifth, say the etheric principle, Akaza, manifests itself, in the highest aspect, in the faith and, in the lowest form, in the instinct of self-preservation. Each of these mentioned four elemental principles has many other aspects corresponding to the law of analogy of the polarity or the positive and negative elements. All of them together form the ego or the spirit. For this reason, we can make the fiery principle responsible for strength, power and passion. Memory, power of discrimination and judgment are ascribed to the air principle, conscience, and intuition to the principle of water, egotism and the instincts of self-preservation and propagation to the earthy part of the spirit. It would be too long to quote all the properties of the spirit with regard to the elements. The incipient adept can enlarge these qualities by serious studies and deep meditation, with respect to the analogous laws of the four-pole magnet. This happens to be a very meritorious work which never ought to be neglected, because it will lead to great success and secure results. These three chapters relating to body, soul, and spirit have represented man in his most perfect form. By now, the disciple ought to have realized how very important it is to know one's own microcosm for the initiation and especially for the magic and the mystic practice, as a matter of fact, for the whole of the secrets. Most of the authors, from sheer ignorance or for other cogent reasons, have omitted this extremely important part, the foundation. 14. The mental plane. As the body has its earthly plane, and the astral body or the soul owns the astral plane, the spirit too has its own plane, the so-called mental plane or mental sphere. This is the mental sphere with all its virtues. Both these spheres, the material as well as the astral one, have been born from the Akaza, original principle of the respective sphere, through the four elements, and also the mental sphere is built upon the same foundation, and therefore likewise a product of the Akaza principle of the spirit, similar to the spirit, developing in a four-pole magnet by corresponding work and showing an electromagnetic fluid analogous to the astral body, on account of the effect of the elements, as a secondary phenomenon of the polarity on the outside. The mental body develops in the mental or spiritual sphere, just in the same way as the astral body, through the electromagnetic fluid of the astral world, forms an astral matrix. The so-called astrolod, the electromagnetic fluid of the mental world, forms a mental matrix, linking the mental body to the astral body. This mental matrix or the mentolod, the so-called mental substance, is the subtlest form of Akaza which controls and preserves the spiritual activity in the astral body. At the same time, this mental substance is electromagnetic and is regarded as leaser of the ideas to the consciousness of the spirit, from where it is put into activity through the astral and the roughly material body. So this mental matrix or the mentolod, with its double pole fluid, is the subtlest substance we can imagine in the human body. Simultaneously, the mental sphere is the sphere of thoughts which have their origin in the world of ideas. Consequently, in the spiritual Akaza, each thought is preceded by a basic idea, which, according to its property, accepts a definite form, and arrives to the consciousness of the ego through the etheric principle, consequently the mental matrix, as expression of the thought in the shape of a plastic picture. Therefore man himself is not the founder of the thoughts, but the origin of each thought is to be sought in the supreme causosphere or the mental plane. Man's spirit, as it were, is the receiver, the intent of thoughts from the world of ideas, according to the situation in which man happens to be, the world of ideas being all. In all, each new idea, new invention, in short, all man believes to have created by himself has been brought out of this world of ideas. This production of new ideas depends on the maturity and attitude of the spirit. Each thought involves an absolutely pure element, especially if the thought implies abstract ideas. If the GHD is based on several combinations of the ideal world, different elements are effective in their form as well as in their mutual emanation. Only abstract ideas have pure elements and pure polar emanations, as they descend directly from the causal world of an idea. From this cognition we may draw the conclusion that there are pure electric, pure magnetic, indifferent and neutral ideas from the standpoint of their effect. According to the idea, each thought in the mental sphere has its own form, color and vibration. Through the tetrapolar magnet of the spirit, the thought arrives at the consciousness, from where it is forwarded to realization. Each thing created in the material world consequently has its cause in the ideal world through the thought in the spiritual consciousness, and is reflected therein. If the point in question is not exactly an abstract idea, several forms of ideas can be expressed. Such thoughts are electric or magnetic or electromagnetic, according to the elementary property of the idea. The material plane is bound to time and space. The astral plane, sphere of the perishable or mutable spirit, is bound to space, the mental plane being timeless and spaceless. The very same thing happens with all the mental properties. The reception of a thought in the mental body, through the link of the astral and mental matrix bound to space and time in the total form, needs a certain amount of time to become fully conscious of this thought. According to the mental maturity, the train of thoughts is different in each individual. The more advanced, the more cultured man is, the faster thoughts will develop in mind. Likewise, as the astral plane is inhabited, so too is the mental plane. Besides the ideal forms, there are principally the deceased ones whose astral bodies have been dissolved by the elements in the course of their ripening, and allotted, according to the degree of perfection, to regions corresponding to their mental sphere. Besides the mental sphere is the sphere of the so-called elementals, beings created consciously or unconsciously by men as a result of repeated and intense thinking. Elemental being is not yet so condensed to form or to assume any astral shape for itself. Its influence is therefore limited to the mental sphere. The difference between an ideal form and an elemental lies in the fact that the ideal form is based on one or several ideas. On the other hand, the elemental is equipped with a certain quantity of consciousness and therefore with the instinct of preservation, but otherwise it does not much distinguish from other mental living beings, and it can even take the same shape as the ideal form. The adept often resorts to these elemental beings. The problem of how to create such an elemental, how to preserve it, and how to utilize it for certain purposes, will be approached in the practical section of this book. There would still be quite a lot to be said about the particular, specific properties of some beings, but all that we have pointed out previously should be sufficient to stimulate the work, and contribute to a succinct enlightenment about the mental plane. 15. Truth. Let us now leave the microcosm, I mean to say, man with his earthly, astral and mental bodies, and turn to other problems which also are imminent to be solved by the incipient adept. First of all, there is the problem of truth. A great many philosophers have already paid serious attention to this problem, and we also will have to approach this task. We shall deal here only with such kinds of truth about which we must be thoroughly informed. Truth depends on the insight of each individual, and as we cannot all have the same insight or perception, it is impossible to generalize the problem of truth. Therefore, from his standpoint and in conformity with the degree of his maturity, each one will have his own truth, providing he sees it quite honestly. Only he who knows and masters the absolute laws of the microcosm and the macrocosm is entitled to speak of an absolute truth. Certain aspects of the absolute truth will be surely acknowledged by everyone. Nobody, indeed, will doubt that there is life, volition, memory and intellect, and will refrain from arguing about these facts. No sincere adept will impose his truth to anyone who is not yet ripe for it. The person concerned would do nothing else but regard it again from his own standpoint. Therefore it would be useless to argue with non-professionals on higher kinds of truth, except people eager to search the heights of truth and beginning to ripen for it. Anything else would be a profanation and, from the magical point of view, absolutely incorrect. At this point, all of us will have to remember the words of the great master of Christianity, "Cast not your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet." To truth belongs also the capacity of correctly differentiating among knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge depends, in all domains of the human existence, on the maturity, receptivity and understanding of the mind, and the memory without regard to whether or not we have been able to enrich our knowledge by reading, transmitting or other experiences. There is a wide difference between knowledge and wisdom, and it is much easier to win knowledge than wisdom. Wisdom depends, not in the least, on knowledge, although both are identical up to a certain degree. The source of wisdom is in God, that is to say, in the causal principle, the causa, on all planes of the material, astral, and mental worlds. Therefore, wisdom does not depend on mind and memory but on the maturity, purity and perfection of the individual personality. Wisdom could also be considered as a developmental stage of the ego. Therefore, insights are not passed on thought the mind, but, and this particularly through intuition or inspiration. The degree of wisdom is therefore determined by the state of development of the individual. This will not mean, of course, that we ought to neglect knowledge. On the contrary, knowledge and wisdom must go hand in hand. The adept will therefore endeavor to get on in knowledge as well as in wisdom, for neither of the two must lag behind in development. If knowledge and wisdom keep the same pace in development, the adept is enabled to grasp all the laws of the microcosm into microcosm, not only from the point of view of wisdom, but also from the intellectual side, that is, in a bipolar way, to perceive and utilize them for his own development. In all the planes, we have already learned how to know one of the numerous laws, the first main key, the secret of the tetragrammaton or the four-pole magnet. Being the universal key, it can be used to solve all problems, all laws, all kinds of truth, in short, everything, provided that the adept knows how to use it properly. As time goes on and his development unfolds, and he is advancing in hermetics, he will be acquainted with many more aspects of this key, and be forced to accept it as an unchangeable law. He will no more wander in darkness and uncertainty, but he will carry a torch in his hand, the light of which will penetrate the night of ignorance. This brief summary will suffice for the adept to instruct him how to deal with the problem of truth. 16. Religion. The incipient magician will confess his faith to a universal religion. He will find out that every religion has good points as well as bad ones. He will therefore keep the best of it for himself and ignore the weak points, which does not necessarily mean that he must profess a religion, but he shall express ought to each form of worship, for each religion has its proper principle of God, whether the point in question be Christianity, Buddhism, Islam or any other kind of religion. Fundamentally he may be faithful to his own religion, but he will not be satisfied with the official doctrines of his church, and will try to penetrate deeper into God's workshop, and such is the purpose of our initiation. According to the universal laws, the magician will form his own point of view about the universe, which henceforth will be his true religion. He will state that, apart from the deficiencies, each defender of religion will endeavor to represent his religion as the best of all. Each religious truth is relative and the comprehension of it depends on the maturity of the person concerned. Therefore the adept does not interfere with anybody in this respect, nor will he try to sidetrack anyone from his truth, criticize him, to say nothing of condemning him. At the bottom of his heart he may feel sorry for fanatics or atheists without showing it outwardly. Let everybody hold on to what he believes and makes him happy and content. Should everybody stick to this maxim, there would be neither hatred nor religious dissensions on this earth. There would be no reason for disputes, and all turns of mind could exist happily side by side. Quite a different thing is, if a seeker, dissatisfied by materialism and doctrines, and longing for spiritual support, will ask advice and information of an adept. In such a case the adept is obliged to supply the seeker with spiritual light and insight, according to his mental powers. Then the magician should spare neither time nor pains to communicate his spiritual treasures, and lead the seeker to the light. 17. God. Since the remotest times, mankind has always believed in something beyond human understanding, something transcendental that he idolized, no matter whether there was question of personified or unpersonified conceptions of God. Anything man was unable to understand or to comprehend was imputed to the powers above, such as his intuitive virtue admitted them. In this way, all the deities of mankind, good and evil ones, demons, have been born. As time went on, Gods, angels, demiurges, demons and ghosts have been worshipped irrespective of their ever having been alive in reality or their having existed only in fancy. With the development of mankind, the idea of God was shrinking, especially at the time when, with the aid of the sciences, phenomena were explained that previously were ascribed to the gods. A lot of books would have to be written if one wished to enter into details of the various ideas of God and the history of the nations. Let us approach the idea of God from a magician's standpoint. To the plain man, the idea of God serves as a support for his spirit, just not to entangle himself in uncertainty or get out of his depth. Therefore his God always remains something inconceivable, intangible, and incomprehensible to him. It is quite otherwise with the magician who knows his God in all aspects. He holds his God in awe as he knows himself to have been created in its image. Consequently, to be a part of God, he sees his lofty ideal, his first duty and his sacred objective. In the union with the Godhead, in becoming the Godman, the rise to this sublime goal shall be described later on. The synthesis of this mystic union with God consists in developing the divine ideas, from the lowest up to the highest steps, in such a degree as to attain the union with the universal. Everyone is at liberty to abandon his individuality or to retain it. Such genii usually return to earth entrusted with a definite sacred task or mission. In this rise, the initiated magician is a mystic at the same time, only performing this union and giving up his individuality, he voluntarily enters into dissolution, which in the mystic wording is called mystic death. It is evident that true initiation knows neither a mystic nor a magic path. There is only one initiation linking both conceptions, in opposition to most of the mystic and spiritual schools, which are dealing with the very highest problems through meditation or other spiritual exercises, without having gone through the first steps at first. This would be very similar to somebody starting with the university studies without having gone through the elementary classes first. The results of such a one-sided training, in some cases, are disastrous, sometimes even drastic, according to the individual talents. Generally the error is to be found in the fact that most of the matter comes from the Orient, where the material as well as the astral world is regarded as Maya, illusion, and consequently little attention is paid to it. It is impossible to point out the details, for this would overstep the frame of this book. Sticking to a carefully planned, step-by-step development, there will be neither a mishap nor a failure nor bad consequences, for the simple reason that ripening takes place slowly but surely. It is quite an individual matter whether the adept will choose as his idea of God, Christ, Buddha, Brahma, Allah, or someone else. All depends on the idea. In the initiation, the pure mystic wishes to approach his God only in the all-embracing love. The yogi, too, walks toward one single aspect of God. The bhakti yogi keeps to the road of love and devotion. The raja and hatha yogi choose the path of self-control or volition. The jnana yogi will follow that of wisdom and cognition. Now let us regard the idea of God from the magic standpoint, according to the four elements. The so-called tetragrammaton, the unspeakable, the supreme, the fiery principle involves the almightiness in the omnipotence. The airy principle owns the wisdom, purity and clarity, from which aspect proceeds the universal lawfulness. Love and eternal life are attributed to the watery principle, and omnipresence, immortality and consequently eternity belong to the earth principle. These four aspects together represent the Supreme Godhead. Let us tread upon this path to the Supreme Godhead practically and step by step, beginning from the lowest sphere, to arrive at the true realization of God in ourselves. Let us praise the happy man who will reach this still in his earthly existence. Us banish fear of the pains, for all of us will reach this goal. 18. Asceticism. From the remotest times, all religions, sects, turns of mind and training systems have regarded asceticism as a very important problem. Various systems of the Orient turned asceticism into fanaticism, causing great damage by exaggeration and wild excesses that were unnatural and unlawful. The mortification of the flesh, generally speaking, is just as one-sided as developing one part of the body only, neglecting all the other parts. If asceticism serves the human body, say in the pattern of a diet, to get rid of slag and other impurities, or to save the body from illness and to compensate disharmonies, then ascetic measures may reasonably be employed, but beware of any exaggeration. Somebody doing hard physical work would, indeed, be very foolish to deprive the body of substances absolutely necessary for its preservation, just because he is privately interested in yoga or mysticism. Such extremes would doubtlessly end up with serious and dangerous injuries to the health Vegetarianism is not implicitly important for the mental progress or the intellectual development, unless it is supposed to be a remedy to clean the body from slag, a temporary abstinence from meat or animal food is indicated only for very specific magic operations as a sort of preparation, and even then only for a certain period. All this is to be considered with respect to sexual life. The idea that by eating the meat of an animal, the animal powers or faculties could be conveyed to oneself is nonsense and originates in a mental ignorance of the perfect and genuine primitive laws. The magician does not pay any attention to such misconception. In the interest of his mago-mystic development, the magician must be moderate in eating and drinking, and observe a reasonable mode of life. It is impossible to fix precise rules or prescriptions, the magic way of life being quite individual. Each and all must know best what agrees or disagrees with them. It is a sacred duty to keep the balance everywhere. There are 3 kinds of asceticism. 1. Intellectual or mental asceticism. 2. Psychic or astral asceticism. 93. Physical or material asceticism. The first kind has to do with the discipline of thoughts. The second kind is engaged in ennobling the soul through control of passions and instincts. And the third kind is concerned with harmonizing the body through a moderate and natural way of life. Without these 3 kinds of asceticism, which must be developed at the same time in parallel to each other, a correct magical rise is unthinkable. To avoid any one-sided development, none of the 3 kinds may be neglected, and none of them may prevail. Further information about how to accomplish this task will be given in the practical training course of this book. Before bringing the theoretical part to an end which has illustrated the principles, I advise everybody that this part should not only be read, but must become the mental possession of the concerned person by means of intense reflection and meditation. He who is going to be a magician will recognize that life is dependent on the work of the elements in the various planes and spheres. It is to be seen in great and in small things, in the microcosm as well as in the macrocosm, temporarily and eternally. Everywhere there are powers in action. Starting from this point of cognition, you will find that there is no death at all, in the true sense of the word, but everything goes on living, transmuting and becoming perfect according to primitive laws. Therefore a magician is not afraid of death, for he believes the physical death to be only a transition to a subtler sphere, the astral plane, and from there to the spiritual level, and so on. Consequently he will not believe in heaven nor in hell. The priests of the various religions stick to these fancies solely to keep their kids to the point. Their moralizing serves only to provoke fear of the hell or the purgatory and to promise heaven to morally good people. Average people, as far as they are religiously inclined, are favorably influenced by such a point of view, for, from fear of hell, they will try to be good. But as for the magician, he sees the purpose of the moral laws in ennobling the mind and the soul, for it is ennobled so only that the universal powers can do their work, especially if body, mind, and soul have been equally trained and developed. Step high. Let us now turn to the practical side of the initiation. We must always be aware of the fact that the body, soul, and mind are to be trained simultaneously, for otherwise it would be impossible to gain and maintain the magic equipoise. In the theoretic part I already called attention to the dangers possibly arising from one-sided training. It is not advisable to hasten development, because everything needs time. Patience, perseverance, and tenacity are fundamental conditions of the development. The pains taken in one's development will be amply rewarded. Whoever is willing to enter the magic path should regard it as his sacred duty to practice regular exercises. He ought to be kind, generous, and tolerant with his fellow men, but relentless and hard with himself. Only such behavior will be followed by success in magic. Refrain from condemning or criticizing and sweep your own doorstep first. Do not permit anyone to look into your sanctuary. The magician will always keep silence with respect to his way, rise, and success. This silence grants the highest powers, and the more this commandment is obeyed, the more easily accessible these powers will become. Manage it so that you spend as much time as possible in your rise or advance. It is quite unnecessary to waste time with sitting for hours, drinking beer, and passing time in trivial company. Time is running away like water, never to return. A certain amount of time ought to be provided for, but it is very necessary to stick to it. Exceptions ought to be allowed for only in quite inevitable cases. Man is subject to habits, and once accustomed to a definite timetable for his exercises, he will feel compelled to do his exercises. In the same way as there is a want for the necessities of life such as eating, drinking, and sleeping, It ought to happen in regard to the exercises, which must, as it were, become a habit. This is the sole way to attain a sure and full success. There is no prize without diligence. It is my ambition to arrange for the instructions as if they were meant for the busiest man. He who has plenty of time of hand may be able to be occupied with 2 or more exercises at the same time. Magic mental training. 1. Thought control, discipline of thoughts, and subordination of thoughts. Take a seat in a comfortable chair or lie down on a settee. Relax the whole body, close your eyes and observe the train of your thoughts for 5 minutes, trying to retain it. At first, you will find that there are rushing up to you thoughts concerning everyday affairs, professional worries, and the like. Take the behavior of a silent observer toward these trains of thoughts, freely and independently, according to the mentality and the mental situation you happen to be in at the moment. This exercise will be more or less easy for you. The main point is not to forget yourself, not to lose the train of thoughts, but to pursue it attentively. Beware of falling asleep while doing this exercise. If you begin to feel tired, stop instantly and postpone the exercise to another time. When you intend not to give in to tiredness, the Indians sprinkle cold water on their faces or rub down the face and upper part of their bodies to remain brisk and not waste precious time. Some deep breathing before you begin will also prevent tiredness and sleepiness. As time goes on, each disciple will find out such little tricks by himself. This exercise of controlling thoughts has to be undertaken in the morning and at night. It is to be extended each day by 1 minute to allow the train of thoughts to be pursued and controlled without the slightest digression for a time of 10 miles newts at least after a week's training. This space of time is destined to the average man. If it should not suffice, everyone can extend it according to his own apperception. In any event, it is advisable to proceed very consciously, because it is of no use to hurry, development being quite individual in men. On no account go further before the preceding exercise is perfectly under control. The attentive disciple will realize how, at the beginning, thoughts rush onto him, how rapidly they pass before him so that he will have difficulty to recollect the lot of manifold thoughts. But from one exercise to the next, he will state that thoughts come up less chaotic, moderating little by little, until at last only a few thoughts emerge in his consciousness, arriving, as it were, from a far distance. The keenest attention ought to be given to this work of thought control, as it is very important for magic development, a fact that everyone will realize later on. Providing that the mentioned exercise has been thoroughly worked through and everyone has a complete command of it in practice, let us pass over to the mental training. Up to now we have learned to control our thoughts. The next exercise will consist in not giving way in our mind to thoughts obtruding themselves on our mind, unwanted and obstinate. For instance, we must be able not to occupy ourselves any longer with the tasks and worries of our profession when we come home from work and return the family circle and privacy. All thoughts not belonging to our privacy must be set aside, and we ought to manage to become quite a different personality instantly. And just the other way round, in our job, all thoughts have to be concentrated in it exclusively, and we must not allow them to digress or wander home, to private affairs, or elsewhere. This has to be practiced time and again until it has developed into a habit. Above all, one ought to accustom oneself to achieve whatever one does with full consciousness, whether in professional work or in private, regardless whether the point is a big one or a trifle. This exercise should be kept for a lifetime, because it is sharpening the mind and strengthening the consciousness and the memory. Having obtained a certain skill in this exercise, you may turn to the following one. The purpose will now be to hold on to a single thought or idea for a longer while, and to suppress any other thoughts associating and obtruding with force on the mind. Choose for this purpose any train of thoughts or ideation or a suitable presentation according to your personal taste. Hold on to this presentation with all your strength. Vigorously refuse all the other thoughts that have nothing to do with the thoughts being exercised. At first you probably will succeed only for a few seconds, later on for minutes. You must manage to concentrate on one single thought and follow it for 10 minutes at least. If you succeed in doing so, you will be fit for a new exercise. Let us then learn how to produce an absolute vacancy of mind. Lie down comfortably on a bed or sofa or sit in an armchair and relax your whole body. Close your eyes. Energetically dismiss any thought coming upon you. Nothing at all is allowed to happen in your mind. An absolute vacancy of mind must reign. Now hold on to the stage of vacancy without digressing or forgetting. At first, you will manage to do so for only a few seconds, but by practicing it more often, you will surely succeed better at it. The purpose of the exercise will be attained if you succeed in remaining in this state for a full 10 minutes without losing your self-control or even falling asleep. Carefully enter your success, failure, duration of your exercises and eventual disturbances into a magic notebook. See details under the heading Magic Soul Training. Such a diary will be useful to check your progress. The greater the scrupulousness you use in doing so, the more easily you will undergo all the other exercises. Prepare a working schedule for the coming day or week, and most of all, indulge in self-criticism. Magic Psychic Training. 1. Introspection or self-knowledge. In our own mansion, meaning our body and our soul, we must find our way about at every moment. Therefore our first task will be to know ourselves. Each initiation system, no matter which kind it may be, will put this condition in the first place. Without self-knowledge there will be no real development on a higher level. In the first days of psychic training, let us deal with the practical part of introspection or self-knowledge. Arrange for a magic diary and enter all the bad sides of your soul into it. This diary is for your own use only, and must not be shown to anybody else. It represents the so-called control book for you, in the self-control of your failures, habits, passions, instincts, and other ugly character traits. You have to observe a hard and severe attitude towards yourself. Be merciless towards yourself and do not embellish any of your failures and deficiencies. Think about yourself in quiet meditation. Put yourself back into different situations of your past and remember how you behaved then and what mistakes or failures occurred in the various situations. Make notes of all your weaknesses, down to the finest nuances and variations. The more you are discovering, all the better for you. Nothing must remain hidden, nothing unrevealed, however insignificant or great your faults or frailties may be. Some especially endowed disciples have been able to discover hundreds of failures in the finest shades. Disciples like these possess the good meditation and a deep penetration into their own souls. Wash your soul perfectly clean, sweep all the dust out of it. This self-analysis is one of the most important magic preliminaries. Many of the occult systems have neglected it, and that is why they did not achieve good results. This psychic preliminary work is indispensable to obtain the magic equilibrium, and without it, there is no regular progress of the development to be thought of. Therefore you ought to devote some minutes time to self-criticism in the morning and at night. If you have got the chance of some free moments during the day, avail yourself of them and do some intensive thinking. Whether there are still some hidden faults anywhere, and if you discover them, record them on the spot so as not to forget a single one. Whenever you happen to find out any deficiency, do not delay to note it immediately. If within a week you do not succeed in discovering all your faults, spend another week on these inquiries until you have definitely established your list of offenses. Having achieved this problem within 1 or 2 weeks, you have reached the point to begin with a further exercise. Now by intensive thinking, try to assign each fault to one of the 4 elements. Appoint a rubric in your diary to each element and enter your faults into it. You will not feel sure of which elements some of the faults are to be assigned. Record them under the heading of indifferent. In the progressing development you will be able to determine the element corresponding to your deficiency. For instance, you will ascribe jealousy, hatred, vindictiveness, irascibility, and anger to the fiery element, frivolity, self-presumption, boasting, squandering, and gossiping to the element of air, indifference, laziness, frigidity, compliance, negligence, shyness, insolence, and instability to the watery element, laziness, lack of conscience, melancholy, irregularity, anomaly and dullness to the element of earth. In the following week you will meditate on each single rubric, dividing it into 3 groups. In the first group you will enter the biggest failures, especially those that influence you strongest or happen at the slightest opportunity. The second group will embrace faults, occurring less frequently and in slighter degree. In the last group you are recording those faults that happen only now and again. Go on doing so with the indifferent faults. 2. Work conscientiously at all times. It is worthwhile. Repeat the whole procedure with your good psychical qualities, entering them into the respective categories of the elements. Do not forget the 3 columns here as well. 4. Example, you will assign activity, enthusiasm, firmness, courage, and daring to the fiery element, diligence, joy, dexterity, kindness, lust, and optimism to the air element, modesty, abstemiousness, fervency, compassion, tranquility, tenderness, and forgiveness to the watery element, and respect, endurance, conscientiousness, thoroughness, sobriety, punctuality, and responsibility to the earth element. By doing so, you will get two so-called psycho mirrors, a black one with the evil qualities, and a white one with the good and noble character traits. These two magic mirrors are correct. Occult mirrors, and none but the owner has any right to look into them at all. Let me repeat once more that the owner must endeavor to elaborate his magic mirrors precisely and conscientiously. If, in the course of the development, he should remember any good or bad quality, he can still record it under the respective heading. These two magic mirrors will allow the magician to recognize rather exactly which of the elements is prevailing in his black or white mirror. This recognition is absolutely necessary to attain the magic equipoise, and the further development depends on it. Magic physical training, 1. The material or carnal body. Hand in hand with the inner development of spirit and soul has to go that of the outer, the body also. No part of your ego must lag behind or be neglected. Right in the morning, after getting up, you will brush your body with a soft brush until your skin turns faintly reddish. By doing so, your pores will open and be able to breathe more freely. Besides, the kidneys are exonerated for the most part. Then wash your whole body or the upper part of it, at least, with cold water and rub it with a rough towel until you feel quite warm. Sensitive people may use lukewarm water, especially in the cold season. This procedure ought to become a day's routine and be kept for a lifetime. It is so refreshing and removes tiredness. In addition to this, you should practice morning gymnastics, at least for some minutes a day, to keep your body flexible. I shall not put up a special program of such gymnastic exercise as everyone can draw it up according to his age and personal liking. What matters most is to keep your body elastic. 2. The mystery of breathing. Breathing is to be given your very careful consideration. Normally each living creature is bound to breathe. There is no life at all without breathing. It is obvious that a magician ought to know more than the mere fact of inhaling oxygen and nitrogen which the lungs absorb and exhale as carbon dioxide and nitrogen. The lungs cannot exist without breathing and food. All we need for our life, and what preserves our life, to wit, breathing and food, is tetrapolar. 4 elements plus a fifth, the vital element or a causative principle, as we have said in the theoretical part about the elements. But the air we are breathing has a finer degree of density than the grossly material food has. But according to the universal laws, both of them have the same nature, being tetrapolar and serving to keep the body alive. Let us therefore return to breathing. Oxygen is subject to the fiery element and nitrogen to the element of water, or nitrogen equals air. Hydrogen equals water. The airy element is the mediating element, and the earth element, carbon, or carbon dioxide, is that which holds together the oxygen and the nitrogen. The acausal etheric element is the lawful causal or divine principle, just as in the great universe of nature. Here the elements too have their polarity, the electric as well as the magnetic fluid. By normal or unconscious breathing, the body is supplied only with as much elemental substance as is necessary for its normal preservation. Here also the supply depends on the consumption of elemental substance. It is quite different with conscious breathing. If we put a thought, an idea or an image, no matter whether it is concrete or abstract, in the air, to be inhaled, it will take in the causative principle of the air concerned and convey it through the electric and magnetic fluids to the air substance. This impregnate air will play a double role when it is conveyed to the lungs through the blood vessels. In the first place, the material parts of the elements are destined to preserve the body. Secondly, the electromagnetic fluid, charged with the idea or the image, will leave the electromagnetic air colored with the idea from the bloodstream through the astral matrix to the astral body, and from there to the immortal spirit through the reflective mental matrix. And this is the solution of the secret of breathing from the magic point of view. Many theologies utilize conscious breathing for instructive purposes, as for example the Hatha Yoga system, without knowing the right process. Several people have suffered severe damage to their health, a fact only to blame in the extreme breathing exercises asked for by this system, especially when such practices have been realized without the guidance of an experienced leader, guru. In most cases, the inexperienced reader has been persuaded to do these exercises because they were promised a quick acquisition of occult powers. If he wants, the magician can achieve the same much more easily and sooner with the aid of the universal initiating system described so thoroughly in the present book. Consequently, it is quite evident that it is not the quantity of inhaled air that matters, but the quality respecting the idea impregnating the air substance. Therefore it is not necessary nor even advisable to pump the lungs full with a lot of air, putting a needless strain on them. Consequently, you will do your breathing exercises slowly and calmly, without any haste. Sit down comfortably, relax the whole body, and breathe in through the nose. Imagine that. With the inhaled air, health, tranquility, peace, success, or everything you are aiming at, will pass into your body through the lungs and the blood. The eidetic image of your idea must be so intense that the air you are inspiring is so strongly impregnated with your desire that it has already become reality. You should not allow the slightest doubt about this fact. To avoid weakening, it will be enough to start with 7 inhalations in the morning as well as at night. Increase the number of breaths gradually to 1 more in the morning and at night. Do not hurry or exaggerate, for everything needs time. In any case, you should not proceed to the imagination of another different desire before the first chosen one has been completely accomplished. In a pupil endowed with talents of a high order, success will manifest itself at the earliest, after 7 days, all depending on the degree of imagination and aptitude. One else will need weeks, even months for the realization of his desires because the kind of desires will also play an important role. It is therefore desirable not to form egotistic wishes to begin with, but to confine them to the above-mentioned ones such as tranquility, health, peace and success. Do not extend breathing exercises to more than 1/2 hour. Later on, a standard 10 minutes will do for you. 3. Conscious reception of food. What has been said about breathing applies in the same way to taking nourishment. Here also, the same elemental processes are going on as they happen to in the air being inhaled, but the effect of the elements is stronger and more material. Desires impressed on food have a considerable influence on the material plane, where they are exposed to the most material emanations of the elements. Therefore the magician will do well to consider this aspect if he wants to achieve anything concerning his body or other material desires. Now sit down in front of your dish of food that you are going to eat, and with the most intense imagination possible, concentrate on your desire being embodied in the food and as effective as if indeed it had already been realized. If you happen to be alone, undisturbed and not watched by anyone, hold your hands in blessing manner above your food. Not having this opportunity, at least impress your desire upon the food you are taking in, or close your eyes. You may give the impression of saying a prayer before eating your meal, a gesture that is quite true, as a matter of fact. Then eat your food slowly but consciously with the intrinsic conviction that, together with your food, your desire actually is passing into your whole body, down to the finest nerves. The taking of food ought to be a sacred act to you, similar to the communion of Christianity. For the magic constitution it is not advisable to eat in a hurry. All kinds of food and beverages are suitable for the magic impregnation with desires. Yet all the impregnated foods and drinks have to be consumed entirely, and nothing should be left over. Do not read during a meal. Unfortunately, a great many people are in this bad habit. Any kind of conversation is also undesirable. One should eat only with the maintenance of one's desire. It is to be noted that no opposite desire should associate. For instance, if you are aspiring after health through conscious or magic breathing, you must not concentrate on success during your meal. It is most advantageous to foster the same desire in breathing as well as in eating to avoid any opposite vibration or emanations in your body. Remember the proverb, he who chases 2 hares at the same time will never catch one. Whoever in the conscious reception of food takes example in the Eucharistic mystery will find an analogy to it here, and remember the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, take and eat. For this is my flesh, take and drink. For this is my blood. He will seize their true and primary meaning. 4. The magic of water. Water plays one of the most important parts, not only in daily life, being absolutely indispensable for drinking, preparing food, washing, producing steam in factories, etc., but also in our magic development. The water element may prove to be a great factor. As we have already stated in the theoretical part, the watery element rules magnetism or the attractive force, and it is just this property that we shall utilize in the development of our faculties. All the books dealing with the animal magnetism, emanation of it and so on are acquainted with the fact that water can be magnetized or iodized, but it is far less known how to enlarge this quality or use it in a different way. Not only water but every kind of liquid has the special property of attracting, and according to the contraction, holding fast, no matter whether good or bad influences be concerned. Therefore we may consider the watery element, especially the material kind of it, as an accumulator. The colder water is, the greater its accumulative capacity. With its full specific weight, namely at 39 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius, above zero, it is most responsive. This notion is not so decisive, for the difference of receptivity of water, or other liquids, up to 43 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 degrees Celsius, above zero is so insignificant and so faintly visible that only a thoroughly trained magician can recognize these differences. If by increase of heat, water grows lukewarm, its receptivity is rapidly diminishing. Between 7 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit, 36 to 37 degrees Celsius, it becomes neutral to magnetism. Attention! Here, our only concern is with the specific properties of the attractive power and its practical value with respect to magnetism, which results from the interaction of the elements as an undeniable matter of fact. The impregnation, through the causa principle present in each substance and consequently in physical water too, with a desire can be operated in any object and at any temperature whatsoever. A piece of bread as well as a hot soup or a cup of coffee or tea might be loaded or charged magically, but this charge does not depend on the accumulative capacity of the water element, but takes place through the causal principle of the fifth power of the elements, and is brought about by the electromagnetic fluid of the elements concerned. It is important to pay attention to this difference to avoid errors. For instance, it is quite impossible to magnetize a dish of hot soup, because the accumulating power of the water element is balanced or increased by the expansion of the heat present in the water if it rises above 99 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. The soup, however, can be impregnated with the corresponding desire. Now let us regard the magic of water from the practical side. Every time you are washing your hands, think intensely that by washing, not only do you wipe the dirt off your body, but also the uncleanliness from your soul. Think of failure, trouble, dissatisfaction, illness in the like being washed off and turned over to the water. If possible, wash yourself under the tap so that the dirty water can run off immediately, and at this moment think that your weaknesses are flowing off with the water. If you have nothing but a wash bowl at your disposal, do not forget to throw away the used water immediately, so nobody else can contact it afterwards. You can also dip your hands into cold water for a little while, and concentrate on the magneto-astral attractive force drawing all weaknesses out of your body and your soul. Be firmly convinced that all failures are passing into the water. You will be surprised at the success of this exercise after a short time. This water also is to be thrown away at once. This exercise is extraordinarily effective if you can manage it in the summer while bathing in a river, when the whole body, except for the head, of course, is beneath the water. You can do this exercise the other way around also, by magnetizing the water you are going to use, or by impregnating it with your desire, remaining firmly convinced that through washing, the power will pass into your body and the desire will be realized. He who has time to spare can combine both exercises by stripping off all evil in one water, say under the tap or in a separate basin, and then washing himself in another basin with the water impregnated with his desire. In this case, namely the first exercise, you have to use soap when washing off the evil. Female adepts have a third opportunity besides the two aforementioned possibilities. They will concentrate their magnetism on the fact that the water makes the face and skin look much younger, more elastic and thus more attractive. It is therefore advisable not only to wash the face, but to dip the whole face into the water for some seconds. This procedure is to be repeated at least 7 times in one turn. A bit of borax may be added to the water for this purpose. There is a further opportunity given to the magician that ought not to be overlooked. I mean, the magnetic eye bath. In the morning the magician dips his face into water that has been boiled on the previous day, using a half-filled water basin, and opens his eyes in the water. He rolls his eyes in the water, repeating this exercise equally 7 times. At first, he will have the sensation of a slight stinging in his eyes, but this will disappear as soon as the eyes get accustomed to the exercise. Anyone suffering from weak eyesight may add a thin decoction of eyebright, herba euprasia, to the water. This eye bath makes the eyes resistant against changes in the weather, and consequently strengthens the visual faculty, improving weak vision, and the eyes become clear and shining. Do not forget respectively to magnetize the water destined to this purpose and to impregnate it with your concentrated wish. Advanced pupils who are training for clairvoyance are offered the opportunity here to promote their clairvoyant faculties. That is all, for the moment, about the material development and training of the body. Summary of exercises of Step High. Step High Magic Mental Training. 1. Thought control. 2. Discipline of thoughts. 3. Subordination of thoughts. A. Control of thoughts twice a day from 1 to 10 minutes. B. Suppression of certain thoughts. holding on to a chosen thought, provoking vacancy of mind. C. Magical diarizing, self-criticism, planning of thought trains for the day or the week ahead. Step high magic psychic training. 1. Introspection of self-knowledge. 2. Making the black and white mirrors of the soul with respect to the elements in 3 spheres of activity. Step high magic physical training. 1. Habituation to normal or reasonable mode of life. 2. Conscious breathing. 3. Conscious reception of food, Eucharistic mystery. 4. Magic of water. The time limit for the completion of these exercises is fixed from a fortnight up to 1 month, and is meant for people of average aptitudes. Those who have already practiced concentration and meditation should get along in this space of time. Those who are not yet experienced will have to extend their training period. Success depends chiefly on the individuality of the pupil. For the practice, it would be useless for him to pass from one step to the next without having completed the foregoing one in such a way that he is well up in it. Step 2. 1. Autosuggestion or the secret of subconscious. Before proceeding to describe the exercises of the second step, let me explain the secret of the subconscious and its practical consequences. In the same way as normal consciousness has its seat in the soul, and is activated by the cerebrum in the body, consequently the head. Subconsciousness is a property of the soul, residing in the cerebellum, that is, the back part of the head. With respect to the magical practice, let us deal with the study of the psychological function of the cerebellum, consequently the subconscious. In every individual that is in his right senses, the normal sphere of consciousness is intact. That is, he always and at any time is capable of making use of the functions of normal consciousness. As it results from our investigations, there is no power in the universe nor in man that does not vary between opposites. Hence we may consider subconsciousness as the opposite to normal consciousness. That which in normal consciousness we subsume by the concepts of thinking, feeling, willing, memory, reason, and intellect is reflected in our subconsciousness in a contrary way. Practically speaking, we can regard our subconsciousness as our opponent, the incentive or the impulse to all that is undesirable, such as our passions, our failures, our weaknesses, originates just in this very sphere of consciousness. To the pupil now falls the task of introspection to disclose the work of this subconsciousness, according to the key of the elements or the tetrapolar magnet. This is a satisfactory task inasmuch as the pupil will acquire self-reliance by his own reflection or meditation. Hence, subconsciousness is the incentive of all we do not wish for. Let us learn how to transmute this, so to speak, antagonistic aspect of our ego, so that it not only does no harm, but on the contrary will help to realize our desires. Subconsciousness needs time and space in the material world for its realization, 2 basic principles valid for all things that have to be transmuted into reality from the causal world. Withdrawing time and space from the subconscious, the opposite polarity will cease to bring its influence to bear upon us, and we shall be able to realize our wishes through the subconscious. This sudden elimination of the subconscious offers the key for the practical use of autosuggestion. If, for example, we inculcate in the subconsciousness the wish of not giving in tomorrow or any other time to any of our passions, say smoking or drinking alcohol, subconsciousness will have time enough to put some hindrance, directly or indirectly, in our way. In most of these cases, mainly in the presence of feeble or underdeveloped willpower, subconsciousness will nearly always succeed in taking us by surprise or causing failures. On the other hand, if we exclude the concepts of time and space from subconsciousness while impregnating it with a desire, only the positive pole of subconsciousness will affect us, normal consciousness being quated, and our impregnate desire must have the success we are expecting. This knowledge and the possibilities related to it are of the greatest importance for the magical development and have, therefore, to be considered as far as self-suggestion is concerned. The phrasing to choose for autosuggestion must always be expressed in the present or imperative form. You should not say, I shall stop drinking or smoking or whatever. The correct form is, I do not smoke, I do not drink, or else, I do not like smoking or drinking, and so on, according to whatever you wish to suggest in a positive or negative sense. The key or clue to self-suggestion is to be found in the form of the phrasing. It is that which, always, and in every respect, has to be considered if you wish to do autosuggestion through subconsciousness. Subconsciousness is acting in the most effective and penetrating way during the night, when man is asleep. In the state of sleep, the activity of normal consciousness is suspended, subconsciousness working in its place. the most appropriate time for autosuggestion. Receptivity, therefore, is the moment when the body is resting drowsily in bed, that is, immediately before falling asleep as well as immediately after waking up, when we remain still half awake. That does not mean that a different time would be quite unsuitable for self-suggestion, but these two moments are most promising, subconsciousness being most responsive then. That is why the magician will never go to sleep in an emotional attitude, such as anger or depression, worries which would have an unfavorable influence in his subconsciousness, going on in the same train of thoughts with which he had fallen asleep. Always go to sleep with peaceful and harmonious thoughts or ideas about success, health and pleasant feelings. Before you practice autosuggestion, make up a small chain of 40 beads. A knotted piece of string also will do fine. This expedient is only meant to avoid counting when you are reiterating the suggestive formula over and over, so as not to divert your attention. This little gadget also will serve to make sure how many disturbances happened when you were practicing concentration and meditation exercises. All you have to do is move a bead or a note at every interruption. The practical use of autosuggestion is very simple. If you have worded that which you want to achieve in a precise sentence in the present and imperative form, such as, I feel better and better every day, or I do not like smoking, or drinking, and see, or I am healthy, content, happy, then you may proceed to the real practice. Immediately before falling asleep, take your string of beads or knot sand, whether in an undertone, softly, or in your mind, according to your surroundings. Repeat the phrase you have chosen and move one bead or knot at every repetition until you arrive at the end of the string. Now you know for sure that you repeated the formula 40 times. The main point is that you imagine your wish as being realized already and having actual existence. If you do not yet feel sleepy after the 40 repetitions, engage yourself for a while longer with the idea that your wish has been accomplished, and keep doing so until at last you fall asleep with your desire still in mind. You must try to transfer your desire to the sleep. Should you fall asleep while reiterating the formula, the purpose will be achieved. In the morning, when you are not quite up and have some time to spare, you ought to reach for the string of beads and repeat the exercise once more. Some people get up several times during the night to urinate or for some other reasons. If so, they can repeat this exercise as well, and they will attain their desires all the sooner. Editor's note: a more modern practice is to use a repeating tape cassette deck to accomplish this automatically. Now the question arises, what kind of wishes can be accomplished by self-suggestion? Principally, every wish can be fulfilled as far as mind, soul, and body are concerned. For example, refining of the character, repression of ugly qualities, weaknesses, disorders, recovery of health, removal and promotion of various aptitudes, development of faculties, and so on. Certainly, desires having nothing to do with the personality as lottery numbers and such can never be fulfilled. Magic mental training, 2. On the first step of our magical mental training, we have learned how to control and master our thoughts. Now let us go on to teach you how to raise the capacity of mental concentration. In order to strengthen the willpower, put some objects in front of you, say, a knife, a fork, a pencil, and a box of matches, and fix your eyes on these objects for a while. Try to remember their shapes and colors exactly. Then, close your eyes and endeavor to imagine a certain object plastically, in exactly the same form as it is in reality. Should the object vanish from your imagination, try to recall it again. In the beginning you will be successful in this experiment only for a few seconds, but when persevering and repeating this exercise, the object will appear more distinct, and disappearance and reappearance will take place more rarely from one exercise to the next. Do not be discouraged by initial failures, and if you feel tired, change to the next object. At the beginning, do not exercise longer than 10 minutes, but after a while you may extend the exercise little by little up to 30 minutes. In order to check disturbances, use the string of beads or knots described in the chapter about autosuggestion. Move one bead at every disturbance or interruption. Thus later you will be able to tell how many disorders happened in the course of an exercise. The purpose of the exercise is completed if you can hold on to one object for 5 minutes without any interruptions. If you have gotten to this point, you may pass on to imagining the object with your eyes open. Now the object ought to make the impression of hanging in the air and be visible before your eyes in such a plastic shape as to seemingly be tangible. Apart from the one object you imagined, nothing else of the surroundings must be noticed. Check disturbances with the aid of the string of beads. If you have succeeded in holding on to any object hanging plastically in the air for 5 minutes without the least incident. The task of this exercise has been fulfilled. After the visual concentration, let us make an inquiry about the auditory concentration. At the beginning, the creative imagination has to perform a certain role. It is, as it were, impossible to say, imagine the ticking of a clock or something like that, because the concept of imagination generally involves a pictorial representation, which cannot be said about auditory exercises. For the sake of better understanding, we ought to say, imagine you hear the ticking of a clock. Therefore let us employ this kind of expression. Now imagine that you are hearing the ticking of a clock on the wall. You will succeed in doing so only for a few seconds at the beginning, just as in the previous exercises. But by persisting in your exercise, you will hear the sound more and more distinctly, without any disturbance. The string of beads or knots will be beneficial here also for checking the disturbances. Afterward, try to listen to the ticking of a pocket watch or wristwatch, or the chime of bells in various harmonies. You may also practice other auditory concentration experiments, such as the sounding of a gong, the different noises of hammering, knocking, scratching, shuffling, thunderclaps, the soft rustling of the wind increasing to the howling of the storm, the tunes of a violin or a piano or other instruments. When doing these exercises, it is most important to keep within the limits of auditory concentration, not allowing for pictorial imagination. Should such an imagination emerge, banish it immediately. The chiming of the bell must never evoke the imagination of the bell itself. This exercise is completed as soon as you are able to keep this auditory imagination for 5 minutes. Another exercise is the sensory concentration. Try to produce the sensations of cold, warmth, gravity, lightness, hunger, thirst, and tiredness, and hold on to this feeling for at least 5 minutes without the slightest visual or auditory imagination. If you have acquired the faculty of concentration in such a degree as to be able to produce any sensation you like and hold it fast, you may pass on to the next exercise. Now let us throw some light upon the olfactory concentration. Imagine that you are smelling the scent of various flowers such as roses, lilacs, violets, or other perfumes, and hold on to this imagination without allowing the pictorial image of the respective flower to emerge. Try to practice with disagreeable smells of different kinds. Exercise this kind of concentration and you are able to imaginarily bring about any scent at will and keep it for at least 5 minutes. Our last exercise will deal with the taste concentration. Without thinking of any food or drink, or without imagining the same, you have to concentrate on taste. Choose the thumping sensations of taste such as sweet, bitter, sad, and acid to begin with. Having got some certain skill herein, you may carry out an experiment on the taste of diverse spices, at your discretion. If you have succeeded in producing any sensation of the chosen taste and holding on to it for at least 5 minutes, the purpose of this exercise is fulfilled. One or another trainee will meet with smaller or greater difficulties in practicing these concentration exercises. This means that the cerebral function with respect to the concerned taste has been neglected or imperfectly developed. Most of the teaching systems will pay attention only to 1 or 2 or 3 functions at best. Concentration exercises performed with all the 5 senses strengthen your mind, your willpower, and you learn not only how to control all senses, but also to develop and finally tame perfectly. A magician's senses must all be developed equally, and he must be able to control them. These are of paramount importance for the magical development, and therefore should never be omitted. Magic psychic training, 2. In the first phase, the pupil has learned how to practice introspection. He has recorded his good and bad properties in accordance with the 4 elements, and has divided them in 3 groups. In this way he has made 2 soul mirrors, a good, white, one, and a bad, black, one. These 2 soul mirrors represent his psychic character. Now he must find out from these records which elemental powers are prevailing in him on the good as well as the evil side, and endeavor to establish the balance of these elemental influences at all events. Without a balance of the elements in the astral body or in the soul, there is no possible magical progress or rise. Consequently, in this step we must establish this psychic equipoise. If the novice magician possesses a sufficient amount of willpower, he may pass on to master the passions or qualities that exercise the greatest influence on him. Should he not own a sufficiently strong volition, he may start from the opposite side by balancing small weaknesses first, and fighting greater faults and weaknesses bit by bit until he has brought them under control. The scholar is offered 3 possibilities for mastering the passions. 1. Systematical utilization of autosuggestion in the way we described previously. 2. transmutation of passions into the opposite qualities, attainable through autosuggestion or through repeated meditations on and continuous assurance of the good qualities. 3. Attention and volition. By using this method, you will not allow for any outbreak of the passion, fighting it right in the bud. This method is the most difficult and is appropriate only for people possessing a good deal of volition, or willing to achieve a strong willpower by fighting against their passions. If the novice has enough time on hand and wishes to advance as fast as possible in his development, he may use all three methods. The most profitable way is to orient all methods toward one single direction, for example conscious eating, magic of water, and so forth. Then, success will not be far off. The purpose of this step is to balance the elements in the soul. The scholar therefore ought to quickly and surely endeavor to get rid of those passions that hinder him most from being successful in the magic art. Under no circumstances should he start with exercises belonging to the steps ahead before being absolutely possessed with the exercises of the second step and having booked a sweeping success, especially in balancing the elements. The refinement of character should be aspired after during the entire course, but as early on as this level, false and bad qualities that handicap development ought to be eradicated. Magic physical training, 2. The tasks of the magical training of the body according to step I must be retained and ought to become a daily habit, such as washing with cold water, rubbing the body from head to toe, athletic exercises in the morning, magic of water, conscious breathing, and so forth. The second step training of the body orders a change of the breathing exercises. In the previous step, we have learned how to breathe consciously and convey the desire inhaled together with the air, through the causative principle, to the bloodstream via the lungs. In this chapter I am going to describe the conscious pore breathing. Our skin has a double function, that is, the breathing and the secretion. Therefore we may consider the skin as a second piece of lungs and as a second kidney of the body. Everybody will understand now, for which important reason we have recommended dry brushing, rubbing, washing with cold water in all the other directions. First of all, this was intended to exonerate our lungs completely and our kidneys partially, and secondly to stimulate the pores to greater activity. It is certainly superfluous to explain how very profitable all this is for the health. From the magic point of view, conscious pore breathing is of the utmost interest for us, and therefore we shall immediately pass on to practice. Sit down comfortably in an armchair or lie down on a sofa, and relax all your muscles. Try to think that, with each inspiration, not only your lungs are breathing, that is, inhaling air, but the whole body is doing so. Be firmly convinced that, together with your lungs, each single pore of your body simultaneously receives vital power and conveys it to the body. You ought to feel like a dry sponge which, when dipped into water, sucks it in greedily. You must have the same feeling when breathing in. This way the vital power will pass from the etheric principle and your surroundings to yourself. According to his character, each individual will feel this entering of vital power through the pores in a different manner. When, after a certain amount of time and repeated exercises, you are skilled in inhaling through the lungs and with the whole body simultaneously, connect the two breathing methods to your desire inhaling, that is, breathing in health, success, peace, mastering of passions, or whatever you need most urgently. The fulfillment of your desire, imparted in the present and commandment moods, is to be realized not only through the lungs and the bloodstream but through your whole body. If you have attained a certain skill in this experiment, you may also influence exhaling magically by imagining that, at each breathing out, you are secreting the opposite to your desire, such as weakness, failure, trouble, and so on. If you have succeeded in exhaling and inhaling through your lungs and whole body, this exercise is completed. The next exercise will deal with the control of your body. It needs a great skill to sit quietly and comfortably, and therefore it is necessary to learn how to do it. Sit down on a chair, in such a way that your spine remains straight. At the beginning, you are allowed to lean back on the chair. Hold the feet together so that they form a right angle with the knees. Sit relaxed, without any strain other muscle, both your hands resting lightly on your thighs. Set an alarm clock to sound off after 5 minutes. Now close your eyes and watch your whole body. At first, you will notice that the muscles are becoming restless in consequence of the nervous stimulus. Force yourself as energetically as you can to persevere to sit quietly, however easy this exercise seems to be. As a matter of fact, it is rather difficult for a beginner. If the knees tend to separate constantly, you may tie them together with a string to begin with. If you are able to sit without jerking and any special effort for 5 minutes, each new exercise is to be Extend it 1 minute longer. If you have managed to sit for at least 30 minutes quietly, comfortably and without any trouble, this exercise will be finished. When you have arrived at this point, you will state that there is no better position for the body to relax and to rest. Should anyone wish to use these exercises of physic carriage for the purpose of developing the willpower, he may make out various carriages at his own discretion, provided he is able to sit relaxed and comfortable without any disturbance at all for a full hour. The Indian yoga system recommends and describes quite a lot of such positions, asanas, asserting that one may win various occult powers by mastering them. It must be left undecided whether it is on the strength of these asanas that such powers are set free. We need a certain position for our magical development, no matter which one, the simplest being that which we described above. It is meant to reassure the body and strengthen the willpower. The main point will always be that mind and soul are in need of an undisturbed action of the body, a problem to be discussed in special exercises further on. Those scholars who become very tired, mentally, as well as psychically in performing the exercises of the first and second steps, and fall asleep regularly during the concentration and meditation exercises, will do best practicing them in the aforementioned position. The beginner ought to practice this sort of body control in his everyday life. He will find a great deal of opportunity by observation and attention. For example, if you feel tired, force yourself to do something else, in spite of your tiredness, irrespective of this being any hobby or a short walk. If you feel hungry, put off the meal for half an hour. If you feel thirsty, do not drink on the spot, but wait for a while. Being used to hurrying all the time, try to act slowly. And the other way around. Anyone who is slow should make a point of working fast. It is entirely up to the scholar to control and force body and nerves by willpower. This is the end of the second step exercises. Step 3. Knowledge, daring, volition, silence. These are the 4 pillars of Solomon's temple, that is, the microcosm and the macrocosm upon which the sacred science of magic is built. According to the 4 elements, they are the fundamental qualities which must be inherent in each magician if he aspires to the highest perfection in science. Everyone can acquire magic knowledge by diligence and assiduity, and mastery of the laws will lead him, step by step, to the supreme wisdom. Volition is the aspect of willpower that can be obtained by toughness, patience and perseverance in the holy science, and chiefly in its practical use. He who does not intend to satisfy his sheer curiosity only, but is in earnest willing to enter the path leading to the loftiest heights of wisdom, must possess an unshakable will. Daring, he who is not afraid of sacrifices nor hindrances, indifferent to other people's opinions, who keeps his objective firmly in his mind, no matter whether he meet with success or with failure, will disclose the mystery. Silence, the braggart who is talking big and exhibiting his wisdom will never be a genuine magician. The true magician will never make himself conspicuous with his authority. On the contrary, he will do anything not to give himself away. Silence is power. The more reticent he is about his knowledge and experience, without segregating himself from other people, the more he will be rewarded by the supreme source. Who aims at acquiring knowledge and wisdom may do his utmost to obtain the aforesaid 4 fundamental qualities, for nothing at all will be achieved in holy magic without these requirements. Now will follow the 3rd step exercises. Magic mental training. 3. In the 2nd grade course, we have learned to practice sensorial concentration by training each sense. On this step, we shall widen our concentration power, expanding from 1 sense to 2 or 3 senses at once. I shall quote some examples, with the help of which the skilled student will be able to arrange his own sphere of action. Imagine plastically a clock hanging on the wall with its pendulum swinging to and fro. Your imagination must be so perfect and so constructive as if it were there, indeed and factually, a clock hanging on the wall. Hang on to this double imagination of seeing and hearing for 5 minutes. In the beginning, you will succeed in doing so for seconds only, but by means of frequent repetition you will be able to hold on to your imagination for a longer while. Practice makes perfect. Repeat this. Experiment with a similar object such as a gong, of which you must hear not only the sound, but also see the person sounding it. Or try to imagine you see a brook and hear the rustling of the water, or a cornfield stirred by the wind and you are listening to the whispering of the breeze. Now try for a change and look for similar experiments, arranging them so that 2 or more senses are affected. Other experiments with optical and acoustic imageries may be composed. For example, where the eyes and tactual senses, sense of touch, are engaged. All your senses have to be quickened and trained for concentration. you should make a special point of seeing, hearing and feeling, all of which is indispensable for progress in magic. I cannot emphasize enough the high significance these exercises have for your development as a magician. Practice such exercises carefully and daily. If you will be able to hold on to 2 or 3 sense concentrations at the same time for at least 5 minutes, your task will be accomplished. If you begin to feel tired during the concentration exercises, stop and cease to go on. Postpone the exercises till a more favorable moment when you feel mentally and physically fit. Beware of falling asleep during an exercise. Experience has shown early morning hours to be most suitable for concentration work. As soon as you have attained a certain skill in the preceding concentration exercises, and if, consequently, you are capable to engage 2 or 3 senses at one time for at least 5 minutes, you may go on. Choose a comfortable position again, which for all concentration work is absolutely necessary. Close your eyes and form an imaginary picture in full plasticity of a well-known country, place, village, house, garden, meadow, heath, wood, etc. Hold on to this imagery. Every trifling detail such as color, light and form is to be kept exactly in mind. All that you are imagining ought to be modeled in such plastic forms as to allow you to touch them, as if you were present there in fact. You must not let anything slip, nothing should escape your observation. If the image becomes blurred or is about to vanish, recall it again and all the more distinctly. If you have managed to hold the plasticity of the picture fast for at least 5 minutes, the task is achieved. Next, let us try to apply the auditory concentration to the same imagery. Perhaps you were imagining a wonderful forest, listened in at the same time to the warbling of the birds, the murmuring of the brook, the rustling of the wind, the humming of the bees and so on. If you succeed in one imagery, try a similar one. This exercise will be fulfilled as soon as you are able to imagine any region, place or spot you like and engage 2 or 3 senses at once for 5 minutes. If you have reached this degree of concentration, try to do the same exercise with your eyes open, whether fixing your look at one definite point or staring into vacancy. The physical surroundings then must no longer exist for you, and the imagery you choose is to appear floating in the air before your eyes like a fata morgana. When you are able to hold such imagery fast for 5 minutes exactly, you may choose another one. The exercise is to be regarded as fully completed if you are able to produce any imagery you like with your eyes open and keep it, with one or several senses, for 5 minutes. In all of your further concentration exercises, you ought to proceed in the same way as, after reading a novel, when you unfold the images of the single events in your mind. We have learned how to form representation of places and localities we know and have already seen before. Now let us try to imagine localities we have never seen before in our life. At first, we shall do it with our eyes closed, and if we succeed in doing so with 2 or 3 senses at once for 5 minutes, let us do it with eyes open. The exercise is fully completed if we have indeed managed to keep this imagination for 5 minutes with our eyes open. Now let us pass over from inanimate objects to living creatures. We shall imagine various animals such as dogs, cats, birds, horses, cows, chickens, etc., plastically as we did before. With our concentration, practice with your eyes closed for 5 minutes, and later on with your eyes open. Mastering this exercise, imagine the animals in movement, such as a cat washing itself, or catching a mouse, drinking milk, or a dog barking, a bird flying, and so forth. The scholar may choose such or similar scenes at his own liking, first with his eyes closed, and later on with them open. If you manage it for 5 minutes without any disturbance, the purpose is fulfilled and you may go on to the next exercise. Now concentrate on men in the same kind of way. Start with friends, relatives, or acquaintances, deceased people, and later imagine strangers you never saw before. First their features only, then the whole head, and finally the fully dressed body, always beginning with your eyes closed and opening the after a while. You must have reached a minimum of 5 minutes before you pass over to the next exercise, dealing with men and their movements such as walking, working, talking, etc. If you have noticed a success with one sense, say visually, add another sense, for example, auditory imagination, so that you can hear the individual talking, and imagine his voice. Always endeavor to adapt imagination to the reality, for example, the modulation of the voice, slow or fast speech, just as the person of your imagination actually does or did. Practice first with eyes closed, then with the eyes open. If you have booked any success in this field too, concentrate your imagination on quite strange people, retaining their different features and voices. They may be people of both sexes, and of any age whatsoever. After that, imagine people of other races, women, men, young and old, children, for example, Negroes, Indians, Chinese, Japanese, etc. Make shift with books or magazines. Visits to a museum can also do for this purpose. Having managed all this and keeping the imagination for 5 minutes with the eyes closed as well as open, your magic mental training of the third step will be complete. All these exercises have required perseverance, patience, persistence and toughness to cope with the enormous difficulties of the task. But those scholars who master them will be very satisfied with the powers they won through these concentration exercises. The next step will teach them how to deepen these powers. Such concentration exercises do not only strengthen the willpower and the concentrative faculty, but all the intellectual and mental forces, lifting the magic capabilities of the mind on a higher level, and besides, they are indispensable as a preliminary practice for thought transference, telepathy, mental wandering, television, clairvoyance, and other things more. Without these faculties, the magic disciple will never get on. Therefore you ought to make every effort to work carefully and conscientiously. Magic psychic training. 3. Before starting on the training for this step, the astral equipoise of the elements in the soul has to be established by introspection and self-control unless you wish to do mischief to yourself. If it is absolutely sure that none of the elements is prevailing, you ought to keep working on the refinement of the character in the course of the development, but you might as well go on to work with the elements in the astral body. The task of this step will be to acquire the basic qualities of the elements, producing and dissolving them in the body at will. We are already acquainted with the theory of the action of the elements. Let us deal with the practice. Fire, with its expansion or extendability in all directions, has the specific quality of heat, and therefore is spherical. Let us then, first of all, acquire this quality and produce it at will in the body as well as in the soul. In body control we chose an attitude allowing us to remain in a comfortable position, free of any disturbance. Indians call this position asana. For the sake of better understanding, we shall also use this expression henceforth. Take the asana position, and imagine yourself in the center of the fiery element which, in the shape of a ball, envelops the universe. Imagine all around you, even the entire universe being fiery. Now inhale the fire element with your nose and, at the same time, with your whole body, pour breathing. Draw deep breaths regularly, without pressing air or straining the lungs. The material in the astral body ought to resemble an empty vessel into which the element is being inhaled or sucked in. With each breath, this heat ought to grow more and more intense with every breath. The heat and the expansion power must become stronger, the fiery pressure higher and higher, until you feel yourself at last fiery red hot. This whole process of inhaling the fiery element through the body is, of course, a purely imaginary occurrence and should be exercised with the utmost plastic imagination of the element. Start on scene times inhaling the fire element and increase each exercise by 1 breath more. An average of 20-30 breaths will do. Only physically strong pupils of great willpower are allowed to exceed his number at discretion. Use the string of beads again to spare counting the breaths by moving 1 bead with each inhalation. In the beginning the imaginary heat will be perceived psychically only, but with every repeated experiment, the heat will become physically as well as psychically more perceptible. From a rise of temperature, outbreak of perspiration, it can actually increase to a fever. Once the scholar has managed to establish the balance of the elements in the soul, such an accumulation of elements in his body can do him no harm. Having finished the exercise of imaginary accumulation of the fiery element, you will, through imagination, feel the heat and the expansion of the fire, and now you may start on the exercise in the opposite succession, inhaling the fire element normally through the mouth and exhaling through it and through the whole body. Pour breathing into the universe again. The number of breaths done when exhaling the element has to correspond exactly to the number of inhalations. For example, if you begin with 7 inhalations of the fire element, you must also exhale 70 elements 7 times. This is very important, because after finishing the exercise the scholar should have the impression that not the smallest particle of this element has remained in him, and the sensation of heat it produced in him must disappear. Therefore, it is advisable to use the string of beads for breathing in as well as breathing out. Do the exercises with the eyes closed at first, and then with open eyes. The Tibetan explorer and traveler Alexandra David Neal in her books a similar experiment practiced by lamas under the name of Tumo, which is, however, very imperfect for practical purposes for Europeans and not at all suitable for any student of magic. In the Orient, there are adepts who perform this exercise for years and are able to condense the fire element to such a degree that they walk about naked and barefoot even in the winter. Without being affected by the cold, they can, indeed, in just a few minutes, dry wet sheets, which they wrap around their bodies. By accumulating the fire element, they affect even their environs, which means the surrounding nature as well, so that they succeed in melting snow and ice not only around themselves, but at a distance of kilometers. Such and similar phenomena can be produced by a European also if he can afford the necessary time for it. For our progress in magic we need, however, to master not only one but all the elements, a fact that is absolutely correct from the magic standpoint. So much for this. Let us now pass on to the exercises concerning the air element. What has been said about the fire element applies in the same way to the air element, but for the fact that a different imagination of the senses has to be considered. Take up the same comfortable position, close your eyes, and imagine yourself to be in the middle of a mass of air that is filling the whole universe. You must not perceive anything of your surroundings, and nothing should exist for you but the air-filled space embracing the whole universe. You are inhaling the air element into your empty vessel of the soul, and the material body through the whole body breathing with the lungs and pores. Every breath is filling the whole body to an increasing extent, and with more air. You have got to hold fast the imagination of your body being filled with air by each breath in such a way that it resembles a balloon. Combine it at the same time with the imagination that your body is becoming lighter, as light as air itself. The sensation of lightness should be so intense that finally you do not feel your body at all. In the same way, you did begin with the fire element. Start now also with 7 inhalations and exhalations. With this exercise done, you should again have the positive feeling that not the smallest particle of the air element remains in your body, and consequently you should feel in the same normal condition as before. To avoid any counting, use the string of beads again. Increase the number of breaths, inspirations and expirations, from one exercise to the next, but do not exceed the number of 40. By constant practice of this experiment, adepts will succeed in producing phenomena of levitation such as walking on the surface of water, floating in the air, displacement of the body and many more, especially if one concentrates on one element only. But magician is not satisfied with one-sided phenomena, because this would not agree with his aims. He wants to penetrate far deeper into the cognition and the mastery, and achieve more. Now follows the description of the practice concerning the water element. Take up the position you are accustomed to by now, close your eyes, and forget all around you. Imagine the whole universe is an enormous ocean and you are in the center of it. Your body becomes filled with this element with each whole body breath. You should feel the cold in the water in your whole body. If you have filled up your body with this element in 7 breaths, you should empty it with 7 breaths. Not the smallest amount of water element should remain in you at the last exhalation. Here again the string of beads will be a great help to you. With each new exercise, take 1 more breath. The more often you practice this exercise, the more distinctly you will feel the cold properties in the water element. You ought to feel, as it were, like a lump of ice. Each of the exercises should not exceed 20 minutes. As time goes by, you ought to be able to keep your body cold as ice even in the hottest summer weather. Oriental adepts master this element in such a degree that they can perform the most astonishing phenomena straight away. For example, they produce rain during the hot or dry season, and stop it again at will. They can ban thunderstorms, calm down the roaring ocean, control all animals in the water, and so on. Such and similar phenomena are no miracles for a real magician who understands them perfectly. All that is left is the description of the last element, that of the earth. Take up your routine position as you did before. This time, imagine the whole universe being the earth with yourself sitting in the middle of it. But do not imagine the earth as a lump of clay, but being a dense earthy material. The specific property of this earthy material is density and gravity. Now you ought to fill your body with this heavy material. Begin again with 7 breaths and increase 1 breath more with each new exercise. You must manage to concentrate so much of the earthy material into yourself that your body seems as heavy as a lump of lead and almost paralyzed by the weight. Breathing out happens in the same way as it did in the other exercises. At the end of this exercise you ought to feel as normal as before the beginning. The duration of this exercise also is limited to 20 minutes at the most. This exercise, sadhana, is practiced by a great deal of Tibetan lamas mostly in such a way that they begin meditating on a lump of clay, dissecting it and going on to meditate on it again. The genuine magician knows better how to approach this element in a much simpler way, and to master it without such a difficult meditation process. The color of the different elements may serve as a useful resort to imagination. As far as fire is red, the air is blue, water is greenish blue, and the earth yellow, gray or black. Color vision or sensation is quite individual, but not absolutely necessary. Anyone believing it to favor his work may make use of it in the beginning. What chiefly matters in our exercises is the sensory imagination. After a longer spell of exercises, everybody should be able, for example, to produce heat with the fire element in such a degree that it can be demonstrated with a thermometer as a fever heat. This preliminary exercise of element mastery needs to be given the utmost attention. The adept can produce manifold kinds of phenomena, say by controlling the earth element, and it is left to everybody to meditate on this problem for himself. Mastery of the elements is the darkest chapter of magic, about which very little has been said to date, because the greatest arcanum is hidden in it. At the same time, however, it is the most important magical domain, and he who does not possess the elements will scarcely get on in magical science. Magic physical training. 3. The first step of this training course ought to have become second nature with you by now. Let us therefore go into greater detail here. The position of repose of the body is to be kept during half an hour. The pore breathing of the whole body now shall be limited to certain single organs. The beginner must be enabled to allow any part of his body to breathe at will through the pores. One begins with the feet and finishes with the head. The practice is as follows. Sit in your usual position and close your eyes. Transfer yourself with your consciousness into one of your legs. It will not matter whether you start with the right or left leg. Imagine your leg, like the lungs, inhaling and exhaling the vital force together with your pulmonary breath from the universe. Consequently, the vital power is inhaled, sucked in, from the universe and exhaled, secreted, back into the universe. If you have succeeded in doing so, after 7 breaths, turn to the other leg. Having been successful herein as well, start with your hands, taking one first, then the other hand in order to breathe, and later with both hands at the same time. If you have achieved the desired result, let us step up to the next organs, such as the genitals, bowels, stomach, liver, lungs, heart, larynx and head. The purpose of this exercise will be accomplished if you have got each organ of your body, even your smallest, to do the breathing. This exercise is all the more important as it gives us the opportunity of controlling each part of the body, charging it with vital power, healing and restoring it to life. If we have managed to all this on our own person, it is not difficult to act on other bodies by transference of consciousness, which fact consequently plays an important part in the magnetic power transference in the magic art of healing. Please pay the greatest attention to his exercise. Another exercise of magic body training is the accumulation of vital power. We have already learned how to inhale and exhale the vital power through whole body pore breathing. Now let us pass on to the accumulation of vital power. Its practice is as follows. Sit in your customary position and inhale the vital force out of the universe into your body, through the lungs and the pores of your whole body. This time, however, do not give back the vital power to the universe, but keep it in your body. When breathing out, do not think about anything at all, and breathe out the consumed air quite regularly and evenly. With each new breath you feel how you are inhaling more and more vital power, accumulating and storing it in your body. You need to feel the pressure of the vital force like compressed steam in yourself, and imagine the compressed vital power coming out of your body like heat waves from a radiator. With every breath the forces of pressure and radiation increase, spreading out and strengthening by meters. After repeated exercises you must be able to emit your penetrating power even for miles. You must actually feel the pressure and penetration of your rays. Practice makes perfect. Begin by inhaling 7 times and increasing by 1 inspiration each day. Each single exercise should be limited to 20 minutes at the most. These exercises have to be practiced mainly in such tasks and experiments as require a great and intense expenditure of vital force, say the treatment of sick people, telepathy, magnetizing of objects, and so on. If the vital power is no longer wanted in this accumulated form, the body must be brought back to its original tension, because it is not advisable to walk about in everyday life in an over-dimensioned tension. It would overstrain the nerves and cause nervous irritation, exhaustion and other bad side effects. The experiment is broken up by giving the accumulated force back to the universe through imagination while breathing out. By doing so you will inhale pure air only, and breath out the tension of the vital force until attaining the sensation of equipoise. After a longer practice, the magician will succeed in rendering the vital force to the universe at once, as it were in an explosive manner similar to a bursting tire. This abrupt elimination should not be practiced before your body has got a certain resisting power. Having acquired a certain skill, you may go on to achieve the same experiment with the single parts of the body, slowly and step by step. Mainly specialize on your hands. Adepts do the same with their eyes, too, thus they can fascinate and get under the spell of their will not only one individual, but a great number of them, sometimes even crowds of people. A magician who can manage all this with his hands is then known for having blessing hands. The mystery of blessing or laying on of hands depends on this. The exercise of this stage will have answered its purpose if you have learned how to accumulate vital power not only in the whole body but in each single part of it, and to emit the rays of this accumulated force directly to the outside. When you master this exercise, the third stage of the magic physical training will be completed. Appendix to Step 3. The scholar who has arrived at this point of his magic development will already observe a general transmutation of his individuality. His magic faculties will increase in all the spheres. As to the mental sphere, he will have attained a stronger willpower, greater resistance, a better memory, a keener observation, and a clear intellect. In the astral sphere, he will notice that he has become calmer and steadier and, according to his aptitudes, he will further develop the faculties still slumbering in him. In the material world, he will persuade himself that he feels healthier, fitter and sort of rejuvenated. His vital force will far surpass that of his fellow men and he will achieve a great deal in everyday life by means of his emissive power. For example, he will be able to free any room he is living in from unfavorable influences. He will be able to treat sick persons successfully, even at remote distances, because he can emit his rays for miles. Besides, his emissive force allows him to charge objects with his desire. The scholar then will find out for himself when and where he can best utilize his magical faculties. But he should never forget that magic powers can be used for the good as well as for egoistic purposes. Remember the quotation, "Thou shalt reap what thou hast sown." Always. Let your final goal be to do noble things and to make mankind better. The technique of magnetism presents all possible variations, of which we are going to show you some. 1. Space impregnation. Through pulmonary and pore breathing of your entire body, you inhale vital force, pressing it with all your imagination into your whole body so that it becomes as it were dynamically radiant. Your body is something like the radiant energy, an individual sun. With every inhalation you enforce the compressed vital power as well as the radiant energy, and fill the room you live in. With the aid of this radiant power, the room must be literally sunlit. With repeated and persistent exercise, it is even possible to illuminate the room in darkness or at night to such a degree that objects can be perceived not only by the experimenter but also by laymen, because it is possible in this way to materialize the light of the vital force in the form of real daylight, which properly speaking is a simple imagination exercise. This phenomenon alone will not of course satisfy the magician, who knows that vital force has a universal character, being not only the carrier of his ideas, thoughts and desires, but also the realizer of his imagination, and that he can attain all things through this vital power. As for realization, it depends on the plastic imagination. If the experimenter has filled his workroom with his radiant energy, he ought to imagine what he wishes to attain, for example, that all astral or magic influences existent in the room shall disappear and dissolve, or the magician shall feel safe and sound in the room as well as all people coming in. Besides, the magician may impregnate his rooms with the desire of being benefited in all his works by inspiration, success, etc. Advanced magicians screen their rooms from unwelcome people by rendering them restless and uncomfortable as soon as they enter the room so that they leave, unwilling to remain in there. Such a room is loaded or impregnated with protective or alarming ideas. But it is possible to load any room in more subtle ways so that anyone who enters the room without permission will feel sort of paralyzed and repelled. You see, a magician is offered a lot of possibilities, and with the help of these instructions, you can find out other methods. The magician can give back the accumulated vital virtue to the universe when breathing out, leaving the radiant or illuminating force in the room only with the aid of his imagination. But through this same imagination he can also suggest the vital force from the universe directly to the room without accumulating it by his physical power, especially if he has got some practice in accumulating vital force. This way, he can impregnate a room even with his own desires. Imagination combined with willpower and faith and firm conviction knows no bounds. These experiments of a magician do not depend on one definite room. He may impregnate 2 or more rooms at the same time, and load an entire house with his vital force and radiant energy, according to the aforesaid method. As imagination knows neither time nor space, he can do all this at the remotest distance. As time goes on and his technique improves, he will be able to load any room whatever and wherever. But with regard to his ethical development, he will never make the wrong use of his faculties, but do noble things only, and his power will be unlimited, for practice makes perfect. Appendix to Step 3. 1. Biomagnetism. Let us deal with another specific property of the vital energy that is of particular relevance for the magic work. As we have already seen, each object, each animal, each human being, each form of ideas can be charged with vital force and the corresponding desire of realization. The vital force, however, has the property of accepting any, also strangers, ideas and feelings, influencing or combining them. The concentrated vital force would therefore soon mingle with other ideas, a fact that would reduce the effect of the impregnated idea or even scuttle it, if the magician did not provoke a reinforced tension by frequent repetition, thus reviving the desire or the idea. This often means loss of time and is not very favorable to the final success. The desired influence will persist only so far as the tension is effective in the desired direction. Then the vital force will dissolve, mingle with other vibrations, and the effect fades away by and by. To prevent this, a magician ought to be well acquainted with the laws of biomagnetism. The vital force accepts not only an idea, concept, thought or feeling, but also time ideas. This law respecting this specific property of the vital virtue must be considered when working with it, or later on with the elements. Therefore, when impregnating desires with the aid of vital energy, remember time and space. In magic work you have to consider the following rules above all. Working in the Akaza principle is timeless and spaceless. In the mental sphere, you operate with time. In the astral sphere, you work with space, shape, color. In the material world, you work with time and space simultaneously. I am going to explain the functions of biomagnetism in the light of some examples. With the help of your vital force, charge a room with the desire that you feel well in it. Enthrall this force with the desire that, as long as you live in the room, the influence should persist. Continue renewing, and keep doing so, even when you leave the room and are absent for some time. Should anyone else enter your room ignoring that there is an accumulation of vital force, he will feel very uncomfortable in your dwelling. Now and again, you can reinforce the density and power of your radiant energy in your room by repeating the desire. If you live in a room influenced in such a favorable way, the stored vital force will always exert a good influence on your health, and consequently on your body. The vital force in this room has the desired vibration of the health. If, however, you intend to do occult exercises in this room, which have nothing to do with health, following another thought vibration, you will not book the same good results as in an unloaded room or in a room that you have charged with a desire responsive to your idea. Therefore it is always advisable to load the room with the thought vibrations corresponding to your respective work and experiments. So for instance, you might charge a ring, a stone or any other object with a wish that the person wearing it should be favored by fortune and success. Now there are 2 possibilities of fixing and timing. The first method consists in fixing the vital virtue on the stone or the metal with your imagination and your concentrated wish, timing it so that the force shall remain forever in it, drawing even further from the universe to bring fortune and success to the person concerned as soon as she will wear the object. You may, of course, load the object you choose for a short time only if you like, so that the influence is broken off as soon as the purpose aimed at is attained. The second possibility is called universal loading, which is operated in the same way, including, however, the concentrated wish that as long a time as the object, ring, stone, jewelry, exists, the bearer of it should be benefited by fortune, success, etc. Such universal loadings performed by an adept will keep their virtues and their effects for centuries. As we have learned from the history of the Egyptian mummies, such fixed forces continue acting for thousands of years. If a talisman or an object destined and individually loaded for a definite person falls into the hands of someone else, he will not experience the least influence. But if this object returns to the true owner, this influence will go on acting. Now let me describe another field where vital force is active, namely that of healing. Magnetism. If a magician treats a sick person, no matter whether personally by magnetic strokes or by putting on hands, or at a distance, that is, by imagination and willpower, he must the law of time exactly if he wants to be successful. The routine manner of magnetizing is as follows. The magnetizer, with the aid of imagination, makes his vital force flow out of his body, mostly from his hands, into the sick person. This method supposes the magnetizer to be positively sound and to have a surplus of vital force, or else he will bring danger into his own health. I am sorry to say that I have seen bad cases where the magnetizer, by excessive transfers of his own vital force, suffered such heavy damage to his health that he faced a complete nervous breakdown, apart from other side effects such as diseases of the heart, and so on. Such consequences are unavoidable if the magnetizer spends more force than he is able to restore, especially if he is treating several patients at once. This method presents another disadvantage, namely that the magnetizer uses his own force to transfer his own psychic vibrations and character traits onto the patient, influencing him indirectly in a psychic way too. Therefore, every magnetizer is supposed and required to be of a noble character. Yet if a magnetizer has a patient whose character properties are worse than his own, he will indirectly draw the evil influences of the patient on himself, which is disadvantageous for the magnetizer in any event. The magnetizer who, however, has been trained in occultism does not give the patient all of the vital force of his own body, but draws it from the universe and makes it stream into the patient's body directly through his hands, together with the concentrated desire of health. With both methods, magnetizing has to be repeated often if one wants a quicker success, for disharmony or diseases suck in and consume the transferred force very rapidly and are greedy for a further supply of force, so that the treatment has to be repeated soon to prevent the state from getting worse. It is otherwise with the magician. The patient feels relieved only when the magician has been psychically opened, that is, if he has accomplished a dynamic accumulation of vital force in his own body and emits light rays of vital force. The magician can employ many methods successfully, but he must always maintain the imagination combined with the desire, concentration, wishing that the patient gets better and better, hour by hour, from day to day. Some methods will follow, the use of which will help a magician in the treatment of diseases. Above all, he must be well versed in the diagnosis of diseases and their symptoms. He will gain this knowledge through a careful study of the respective literature. Anatomical knowledge is absolutely indispensable. He will not be so careless as to treat diseases necessitating a rapid chirurgical intervention, or infectious diseases, but in such cases he will be able to accelerate the healing process and contribute to soothing the pains. Besides the medical treatment, he can manage doing so even at a distance. It would be very serviceable if physicians specialized in this field and, besides the allopathic art, learn to employ the magic practice. Therefore the magician should only treat such sick persons as are recommended for this kind of treatment directly by a physician, or work together with a physician to avoid being regarded as a quack or a charlatan. He should follow his calling from pure love of his neighbors and not for the purpose of earning money or as a means of enriching himself. Do not climb upwards on the credulities of mankind. Hold on to the ideal of goodness, and blessing will not fail. Ideally colored magicians will help sick persons without them knowing anything. This kind of help is the most blissful. Let me add some of the most conventional methods a magician can make use of without endangering his health and nervous system. Before approaching a sick person's bed, do at least 7 breaths through the lungs and pores. Accumulate an enormous amount of vital force, drawing it from the universe into your body. And let this vital force shine like brightest light of the sun. By repeated inhaling of the vital force, try to produce a radiant energy of at least 10 yards around your body, which corresponds to a vital force of 10 normal persons. You ought to feel as if your accumulated vital force were lighting up like a sun. If you approach a patient with such a radiance, he will instantly feel a relief, a sensation of ease, and if not afflicted by too painful an illness, he will feel an immediate alleviation. You transfer the accumulated radiant energy quite individually to the patient, and it is up to you to act as you like. A skilled magician needs no magic strokes nor laying on of hands, all that being only auxiliary manipulations, supports for the utterance of his will. He may keep his eyes open or closed during this operation. If he wants, he may look straight at the patient, but he need not do it directly. Here it is exclusively the imagination that is working. But during the whole act of power transference, the magician may also sit with the patient without contacting him personally. Imagine that the radiant energy surrounding you will stream forth into the patient's body and be pressed into it, penetrating and illuminating all the pores of the sick person. Let your willpower order the compressed radiant energy to bring about the recovery of the patient. All the time you have to be absolutely convinced that the patient is feeling better from 1 hour to the next, that he does look better every day, and you must also order the radiant energy not to escape from the body before the patient has fully recovered, loading the body of a patient quantitatively with the radiant energy, which in a sound person means a range of 1 yard. You will be able to bring about recovery in a surprisingly short time in proportion to the kind of illness. Repeat the loading after a while, reinforce the tension of the concentrated radiant energy, and you will be very surprised indeed at noticing the wonderful success you have accomplished. First of all, the radiant energy cannot escape because you fixed it, ordering it to renew itself constantly. Secondly, you fix the time so that the body should feel better from hour to hour, from day to day. And thirdly, you have proportioned the power to the space corresponding to the circumference of the body. At his point, it should be recommended to fix the power of radiation at about 1 yard outside the body, which is equal to the radiation of a normal human being. With this method you have now fulfilled the main condition of the material law of time and space. While using this method, the magician will notice that his radiant energy which he transferred to the patient does not diminish, but keeps on lighting up in the same intensive manner as before. This is to impute to the fact that the vital power accumulated in the body renews itself automatically, similar to communicating pipes, instantly replacing the radiated power. Therefore it is obvious that a magician is able to treat hundreds of patients without ruining his mental strength or his nerves. A different method has to be used if the magician is pressing the vital power directly into the patient's body or into the sick part of the body, only by way of the pores together with the imagination of renewing itself constantly from the universe, till the moment of complete recovery is reached. Here the imagined desire of complete recovery is limited to time and space as well. But this method is only practiced with patients whose nervous system is not yet wholly exhausted, and can consequently bear a certain pressure of the accumulated vital power. With a well-trained magician, of course, the accumulated vital power is, as it were, materialized already, meaning that it is condensed material power that can be compared to electricity. This method, in comparison with the others, is the most popular because it is very simple and exceedingly effective. A very peculiar method is to let the patient inhale one's own radiant power emanation with the help of the imagination. Presuming the patient to be able to concentrate, he can do so himself. Otherwise, the magician has to perform the imagination instead of the patient. In practice the occurrence is as follows. Your radiant energy is emitting up to a range of 10 yards. As you are near the patient, he is actually swimming in the light of your radiation, which has been impregnated with the desire of recovery. The patient on whom this power has been concentrated will be firmly convinced that he is inhaling your radiant energy with every breath, and will get well. He must imagine intensely that he will go on feeling better and better, even when the magician will no longer be near him. Presuming the patient to be unable to concentrate, or, in the case of sick children, you imagine yourself that with every inhalation the patient accepts your own radiation of vital power, conveys it to the blood, and will bring about a complete recovery. Here also you will have to concentrate on the wish that the force inhaled by the patient should keep on working positively in him. This has been an example of vital force transference from the magician's to another's body by breathing. We can rely on the word of the Bible. When our Lord Jesus Christ was touched by a sick woman in the hope of recovery, our Lord felt the diminution of his vital power, and he remarked to his disciples, "I have been touched." Working with vital power and magnetism, one has to consider time and space, with a view to this fact. I have quoted several examples concerning the treatment of diseases, and I could still mention quite a number of methods for treating sick people from the magnetic standpoint. For example, the magician is able to take up a connection with the mind of a sleeping patient and to realize various methods of treatment in the patient's body. Apart from treating the sick with vital power, he can also cure them magically with the help of the elements, magnetism, and electricity. The detailed description of all the methods and possibilities of treatments would certainly fill a very voluminous book. In this work I am only going to point out single procedures of treatment with regard to time and space, that is, magnetism. High adepts and saints who have trained their imagination to such perfection that all their imageries are realized immediately in all planes do not need methods anymore. Such people have only to express any kind of desire and it will be realized at the very same moment. Step 4. Before describing the difficult exercises of the following step, I wish to point out again that the scholar is not allowed to hurry in his development. He ought to take sufficient time for this purpose if he wants to achieve a real success on the road to magic. He must be absolutely firm in all the exercises of the previous steps before turning to the following ones. Magic mental training. 4. I shall describe here how to transplant your consciousness outwards. We must understand how to transplant our consciousness optionally into every object, animal and human being. Similar to the concentration on objects, put some objects which you are using every day in front of you. Sitting in your habitual position, fix your eyes for a short while on one of the objects, and inculcate the shape, color and size of it firmly in your mind. Now imagine yourself being transmuted into this object. In a way you must feel as the object itself and adopt all its properties. You have to be quite certain of the fact that you are fastened to the spot you have been put, unable to abandon it except through an outside influence. You should even be capable by intense concentration to regard your surroundings from the point of this object, and to grasp its relationship to other objects. For example, supposing the object happens to be on the table, you feel the relationship to this table as well as to all the other things on the table, including the room in which the objects happen to be. Having managed this exercise with one object, you can gradually turn to the other things. The exercise is fulfilled if you have managed to connect each object you selected to your consciousness so that you have adopted the shape, size, and quality of the object, and that you remain in it for at least 5 minutes without any interruption. It must be possible for you to overlook and forget your body completely. Having managed this task, you can choose bigger objects like flowers, plants, shrubs, trees, etc. for your concentrative transmutation of consciousness. Consciousness knows neither time nor space. It is consequently in a causative principle. Nobody should be deterred by the unusual kind of the exercises and by eventual failures at the beginning. Patience, perseverance and tenacity will soon lead to the success aimed at. The scholar will learn later what significance these preliminary exercises have for the further magical work. As soon as one is able to manage transplanting consciousness into inanimate objects, the exercises with living objects will follow. It has been said before that consciousness is timeless and spaceless, and it is not necessary, while doing the exercises with living creatures, to have the object concerned directly before our eyes. By now the scholar should be trained so far as to be able to imagine any creature he likes to. Let him therefore transplant his consciousness in the imagination of a cat, a dog, a horse, a cow, a goat, etc. The kind of experimental object does not matter. It might as well be an ant, a bird, or an elephant. At first one begins with the imagination of the animal in the motionless condition. Later on walking, running, creeping, flying or swimming, corresponding to the kind of object in question. The scholar must be able to transmute his consciousness in any form he likes to, without interruption if he wishes to regard this as being mastered. Adepts who have been practicing this exercise for years are able to understand any animal and handle it by their will power. In connection with this fact, all we need is to remember the legend of werewolves and other tales by which wizards transmuted themselves into animals. But fairy tales and legends have a far deeper significance to the magician. There is no doubt that these are cases of the so-called black magicians, who adopt all sorts of animal shapes in the invisible world not to be recognized while doing their wicked work. The good magician will always condemn such actions, and his spiritual faculties allow him to see through such creatures and to recognize the real figure of the artificer. Our preliminary exercises do not serve to induce the scholar to wicked deeds, but to prepare him for the higher magic, where he will have to adopt higher divine forms into which he will transplant his self-consciousness, if one has been trained during the exercise to the point of being capable of adapting any kind of animal shape with the consciousness, and if one can manage to maintain this imagination for 5 minutes without interruption, then the same exercise has to be practiced on human beings. For the beginning, select acquaintances, friends, members of the family, whose imagination you are able to keep in mind, without discrimination of sex and age. One always has to be very sure about how to transplant the consciousness into the body so that one feels and thinks oneself as being the imaginary person. From well-known people one may turn to strangers never seen before, and therefore to be imagined. Finally, you may choose people of different races as experimental subjects. The exercise is ended if you manage to transplant your consciousness for at least 5 minutes into one of the imaginary bodies. The longer the spell of this achievement, the more profitable it will become. This particular exercise gives the magician the power to connect himself with every human being, not only to know the ideas and feelings developing in the imaginary person, his past and his present, his way of thinking and acting, but even to influence him according to his own liking, but still with the proverb in mind, what a man sows, he shall reap. So the magician will never use his influence for anything bad or force people to act against their own will. He will use the great power over every human being given him through these exercises for the good only, and the blessing will never fail. The magician will learn from these facts why the Oriental scholar bestows the highest worship to his master. By worshipping the master, he connects himself instinctively with the master's consciousness, and so being influenced indirectly, his progress will be far more certain and faster as well. It is quite obvious that the Oriental training methods regard a master, guru, as absolutely necessary for the development of a scholar. The well-known Tibetan mentor is based on the same fundament, but in the inverted order. The master connects himself with the scholar's consciousness and transplants power and enlightenment to him. The same thing happens in the case of HERMETICS, the point in question being the pneuma transfer. Magic psychic training. 4. In this chapter we shall amplify the work concerning the elements. We have learned to take in the element by breathing through the lungs and pores, and to perceive its specific qualities in our whole body. Now we shall charge single parts of the body with any element we like, which can be executed in 2 different ways. The magician should manage both methods. The first one is as follows. In the same way as described in step 3, through inhaling with lungs and pores, you are breathing the element into the whole body and accumulating it there. That means you are breathing out thoroughly without any imagination at all. While inhaling, connect your imagination of feelings with the specific quality of the element, fire forming the idea of heat, water that of cold, air of lightness, and the earth of gravity. You have to begin with inhaling 7 times. Instead of dissolving the accumulated elements, giving it back to the universe. Through imagination, lead it to the part of the body you choose, by compressing the specific quality of the element, and fill the concerned part of the body with it. You should feel the compressed element with its specific quality much stronger in the single part of the body than in the whole body. Similar to steam producing a higher pressure when being compressed, the flesh, bones and the skin of the single part of the body have to be penetrated with the element. Consequently, if you are feeling the specific quality of the element enormously strong in the loaded part of the body, let it be dissolved with the help of your imagination throughout the whole body, and by breathing out, as described in step 3, let it stream forth and back into the universe. This exercise is to be done with each of the elements, alternately with every external and internal organ, with the exception of the brain and the heart, to avoid damage. Do not ever accumulate any element in these 2 organs at all, neither in your own case, nor in the case of other people. Only a master who is perfectly experienced in managing elements may allow himself a certain accumulation in the heart and brain without ruining himself. He knows his body and has got it well in hand. Every organ, the heart and brain as well, are suited for the supply of elements with their specific qualities, but of course without any accumulation. The beginner should always avoid the accumulation of elements or vital power in the heart or brain, especially if he is not yet able to observe the functions of the different organs with the help of clairvoyance. By performing an accumulation of elements or vital power in the whole body, the brain and the heart are getting used to the general accumulation. Because in this case attention is not related to one organ only, but is expanding over the whole body. It is very important indeed to manage the accumulation of elements and vital power in the hands and feet very well, because this will be of manifold use in the practical application of magic. The keenest attention should be paid to the fingers. A further possibility of withdrawing an element from an organ of the body is not to lead the accumulated element back into the body and deliver it through pore breathing to the universe, but with the help of imagination to return the whole element through the pores at once from the organ back to the universe. This process is quicker. A magician naturally must be capable of managing both methods and must understand how to handle them quite at will. The second method of element accumulation in any part of the body is to transfer one's own personality with the consciousness into one part of the body and to allow it, similarly to breathing through the pores, to inhale in and to breathe out the element that is inhaled with. Every breath stays there while you are breathing out thoroughly. As soon as you are feeling that a sufficient amount of the element has been accumulated in the inhaling part of the body, set it free again while you are breathing out. Give it to the universe from where you have drawn it. The process is quite simple and quick, but it requires a perfect transplantation of the consciousness. On the other hand, the accumulation of vital power in a certain part of the body has to be managed very skillfully indeed. When perfectly acquainted with this practice, you can proceed to a further step. We all know that the human body is divided in 4 principal regions, corresponding to the elements. For the sake of a better understanding, we shall repeat it. The feet up to the thighs. Rump bone including the genitals corresponds to the earth. The abdominal region with all the internal organs such as bowels, milt, gall, liver, stomach to the midriff corresponds to the water element. The chest, the lungs, and the heart to the neck correspond to the air element, and the head with all its organs to the fire element. The task of the next exercise is to load the different regions of the body with the corresponding element. The practice is as follows. Take up your favorite position, asana. By breathing through the lungs and pores, inhale the earth element with its specific property of gravity into the earth region of the body, from the feet along the genitals to the rump bone. Inhale the earth element 7 times, and breathe out thoroughly, thus filling the earth region with the element influencing it. Keep the earth element in the earth region and inhale the water element 7 times into the water region. That is, the abdomen, without breathing it out, so that this region remains equally filled with its own element. Then turn to the next element and fill the chest with the air element 7 times, leaving this element in its own region without breathing it out. Now it is the turn of the head region, which you fill by inhaling the fire element 7 times. Exhale the empty breath and the head region will also remain filled with the fire element. All the regions being loaded with the corresponding elements. Remain in this position about 2 to 5 minutes. And then begin with the dissolving of the elements. One begins where one finished, from the head with the fire element by empty inhaling 7 times, and breathing out the fire element 7 times into the universe. The head region being disengaged from the element. The next region we have to look at is that of the air, and after that the region of water, and finally that of the earth, until the whole body is free from the accumulation of the elements. If you achieved a certain skill in this practice, you may extend it by not only filling the different body regions with the elements, but by accumulating the elements in these regions. The process is the same as just described, that is, you begin again with the earth element and finish with the fire element. The procedure of dissolving is equal to the one of the previous experiment. These exercises are of great importance, because they establish the harmony between the material as well as the astral body in the universal rule of the elements. If the magician should ever get into disharmonies through any peculiar circumstance, all he has to do is practice these exercises and he will immediately redress the harmony. He will experience the comforting influence of the entire universal harmony not only for a few hours but for days, which is creating and keeping in him the feeling of peace and happiness. The harmony of the elements in the body offers more advantages, of which I shall mention only a few. First of all, the scholar is protected against the pernicious influence of the negative side of the elements. The very moment the scholar has achieved the magical equipoise, he is standing in the center of all events, and will be aware of all the laws, all the constitutive moments and processes taking place in the universe. In the true perspective, the scholar is spared from many illnesses, producing an effect of balance on his own karma and thus on his fate. He becomes more resistant against any dangerous influence. He is cleaning his mental and astral aura, strengthening his mental and astral matrix. He is reviving his magical faculties, and his intuition will become of universal character. His astral senses will be refined and his intellectual capacities will rise. Magical physical training. 4. The exercises of the first step should have become a habit by now. Those of the second step have to be enforced and deepened according to time and opportunity. One ought to have the capacity of sticking firmly to any asceticism one has imposed upon oneself without having to fight temptations or even to succumb to any of them. The exercises of the third step are to be deepened as well. One has to manage the position of the body so far as to endure the asana seat for hours without feeling the slightest disturbance, nervousness, tension or convulsion. The power of radiation has to be enforced, deepened, and must become more expansive, meaning more dynamic, which has to be accomplished by imagination and deep meditation. The magician has to learn the practical use of the radiant power for any purpose, and in any situation. He must reach such a degree of perfection that any desire that he is transplanting into the radiant power is realized instantly. In this manner he will be able to help suffering people in cases of illness and accidents, and thus bring great blessing to himself. Now we shall go on to a further chapter, also unknowns to date, concerning positions of the body, gestures and positions of the fingers, generally known as ritual. The fundamental principle of rituals is based on confirming an idea, a train of thoughts by an external mode of expression, or the other way around, producing a train of thoughts by a gesture or an action, which we shall designate evocation in Hermetics. This maxim is standing for the entire magical ritual. It is stated hereby that not only any idea can be expressed by an action, but can also be bound to a certain task. This refers to any creature as well. Anything not receiving and bearing a special name, symbol or external mark is without significance. All the magical processes and rituals are based on this primordial thesis in every religious system with its special cults since the remotest times. The only difference is that nothing but a very small part has been accessible to the masses, whilst most of it has been kept strictly secret but reserved only to high priests and adepts. Every ritual answers a certain purpose, regardless whether the point in question be the banning witchcraft of Tibet or the gestures of fingers, mudras, performed by the Bali priests in their cults in the Orient, or the exorcism ritual of magicians. The synthesis will always remain the same. At a trial, the hand with 3 fingers raised for the oath as